All right, we're live. Here to talk about your 100-run streak, eh, GJ? This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm super excited. Um, I guess I'm going to be most of the voice chat, if all of it. So,
So give
hello
us a
to
little more
everybody.
context on the 100 run streak. What happened?
Well, I think we're going to be having a lot of context during this discussion, and I'll let GJ
I
say
mean,
most
like,
of it.
is
But
this 100 wins in a row, or is it 100 sessions completed?
it is 100 wins in a row with end screens to validate and show off all of the different builds that GJ was able to put together. And it's still ongoing. It has not ended. So really, it's just a momentary pause for discussion, right? There's been a lot of people in the chat saying that the game is solved after this, which I don't know. I don't know how true that is, but it is certainly surprising to see 100 wins in a row. I mean, I'm personally on my own streak currently of 13 wins, so I was pretty happy with that. And I remember at one point GJ was saying that he was surprised to get more than 30. So obviously expectations had been blown out of the water. Um, yeah, started with wanting to race a certain other win streaker, right? Yes, it's been a fun competition. Although obviously I've been blown out of the water. I'll probably continue my own at some point, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. Um, so yeah, 100 wins, super cool. A lot of interesting strategies and uh, gold analysis, if you will, has been developed around these runs. Um, GJ has been employing an interesting form of analysis of the game revolving around monetary value in terms of the game's currency gold and its equivalence for all of the different stats like HP, MP, energy, all of that. Um, so GJ is saying, let's establish some basic magnitudes again and how confident we are in the ranges specifically. Okay. If I remember correctly, initially you said that 1 HP is equal to 1 MP is equal to 1 EP, which is energy, and that they were all relatively around 20 gold. Let me make sure that you still agree with this assessment. Um, we know that the player is willing to use heal sensor, which is the tool that lets you heal HP for, I can't remember exactly how much energy, but a certain amount of energy. I think it's 2. Um, uh, so we know that the player is willing to use the heal sensor if you're not about to rest. Yeah, it's 5 HP for 2 rep. That's right. Yeah, and each reputation is worth 50 gold, according to the donation box. So this isn't necessarily an arbitrary value, right? This is objective in the game. So that's pretty cool. So we know the player is willing to use the heal sensor if you're not about to rest, right? You want to keep your stack going, preferably, or maybe you just don't want to spend the food. And you're not buying something extremely specific, right? Maybe you don't want to spend the gold on more reputation or whatever. You're just trying to save the gold. Um, so, let me make sure I read that correctly. We know that the player is willing to use the heal sensor if you're not buying something extremely specific. In other words, if you're very general in what you're trying to buy, or maybe you don't really care how your money is spent, the heal sensor. Actually, that makes. I'm sorry, I had the opposite before. If you aren't saving up your gold specifically, you're more likely to spend gold into the donation box, which makes the heal sensor more valuable, essentially. I think I got it that time. In terms of variance, if you go from, say, 3 HP to 1 on a rotten door, the cost of that HP is close to 0 gold. Can't use it elsewise. In other words, knocking down a rotten door, going from a close to rest to definitely rest scenario really doesn't cost you anything, right? Because you were going to rest anyway. But also, I think there's this is GJ talking. Also, I think there's a modest medium frequency of situations where it goes up to 100 gold. In rare cases, it'll of course go to 500 gold or whatever, but that's largely irrelevant, right? Like super, super dangerous situations, essentially. Given this, do you feel like above 20 gold is fair, or does above 30 gold per HP sound better. This is also a question of how balanced is heal sensor for the average value. Interesting. Well, certainly HP is valuable, right? And it's certainly valuable. I think it's more valuable in the early game even than the late game. Because if you have lots of HP early on, it means you can explore more, and that means you can find more power, which will certainly allow you to make better decisions and enter the late game more prepared. So, in that regard, I mean, obviously, like we said, sometimes that 2 HP from like a rotten door or maybe like a bush or whatever is completely irrelevant because you were going to rest, and that's 0 gold if you were to use a heal sensor. But I think the times that the HP is valuable are often, and valuable. If HP is above 30 gold and the healing part of ale is above 90 gold, how often would you buy those for above 100 gold? Yeah. I mean, 3 HP off the ale. The ale is like one of the weaker healing items, but it also has the lowest costs. So it does feel weird buying an ale for that much. But also, we're not talking about the cost of an inventory slot here. I mean, I guess if we say that that's irrelevant, which maybe it is, then I guess, if I'm not saving up for a specific item, like you said, there are definitely times where I would buy that ale. Yeah? Just for even 120 gold. I guess that's not average case, right? Yeah, right. If I'm saying that there are moments when I would buy that, that doesn't mean most of the time. It means some of the time. And that's probably true. There are definitely times when the ale is a lower priority, and I wouldn't pay anywhere near 120 gold for one. So that's interesting. Maybe it is hard to say that it's above 30 gold. But it certainly feels like it's more than 20 gold. Right? I mean, I definitely feel like we're getting value out of heal sensor, for example. Yeah, I think it's more like 25 gold. Yeah, when I think about it. We're saying it's like above 20 gold, but less than 30 gold, probably. When we think about it in terms like that. I think heal sensor is quite balanced as is. Use it to win runs on its own. Or it used to win runs on its own. Interesting. Yeah, I don't think it wins runs on its own anymore because rep is expensive. Right? Now, you can't get rep other ways, and then all of a sudden, you're just generating a ton of value. But I think those cases are also not the average. So, given that, do you suspect either MP or EP is clearly above or below HP in value? Okay, so my inclination is that MP is the least valuable of the 3 attributes. The reason for that is there's so many MP restoring values, or items, and as powerful as magic is, it's pretty much always supplementary for builds. So not required. I mean, it's not always the case, but I would say on average it's supplementary. So with that in mind, energy is, often quite valuable as well for opening stuck doors and things. I would counter that by simply saying that night leaves are very strong. Those don't feel like losing runs. I don't disagree. But what about the times that you drop the night leaves, I have a heuristic for MP that's pretty easy to get 1 HP from it. but 2 HP is harder. Okay. I would like to hear this because it's interesting to think about that. Like, how exactly would we correlate it? My initial claim is that MP is greater than HP. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So counter to what I would suspect. For example, how do you feel about U1 Contaminate Wand? Okay. So Contaminate Wand is the wand that gives disease to your enemies, and it costs 1 MP, I believe. And normally I think that this wand is relatively low value. However, explain what disease is, because it's two-parted. Sure. So disease, for those that don't have a ton of experience with the game, disease is a status effect that says when you rest, you cannot heal. Okay? And what that really means is when the player rests. Okay? Because you can give disease to monsters, and when the player rests, those monsters will not heal. Whereas normally they would. Like, normally when you rest, monsters that are unconscious wake up, and all monsters that sleep will go to sleep and regenerate their HP. So if you're giving monsters disease, all of a sudden, a strategy that opens up is, say, going down a stairs in Underground 2, beating some dogs up a little bit until say you're low HP or whatever, until they are low HP, hitting them with disease, right? And then going back up the stairs and resting. And when you go back down, the dog will still be low HP. Maybe it's running from you, and now you don't take any damage from the rest of that fight. And you've essentially gained that HP that you were going to spend by resting anyway, right? If you were at 4 HP or whatever, you were just going to lose that 3 HP buffer. So, yes, I can see that there is a way to generate value from the Contaminate Wand, especially early on, because not all monsters are vulnerable to disease. If you have Contaminate, you always throw it on a difficult enemy, and they'll flee sooner. That's right. I kind of forgot about that aspect as well. Enemies do flee sooner when they are contaminated, which means that, for example, goblin fights, enemies that have like 5 HP, normally you have to get them to 1 HP before they leave, which is at best 2 attacks with your fists, right? And usually much worse than that. Now, if they flee earlier than that, all of a sudden, these enemies are no longer a threat because most of them don't have ranged attacks or whatever. And that is a good way to save HP as well. You could just leave them alone and either return to the floor later, or when you rest, they'll also be low HP still. All of these things are fine. You can deal with them at a different time. It's kind of better than U1 Magic Missile when cast, but you can't really get 7 casts. That's interesting. That's interesting. So in that way, you should think about wands as having 2 real attributes here. It's the power of each cast, and then how many casts you can reasonably expect to get from a wand with the amount of MP you have and all that. Or even just in general, right? I think you'd expect almost 2 HP per Contaminate, but you can't spend all 7 MP with just Contaminate. I see. Yeah. Going along with what I just said, that makes perfect sense. With the new stuck doors, I think having a wand to spend is not infrequent, but ones where you can't spend MP are harder seeds. Given this, I'd like to claim MP is greater than 25 gold or greater than 30 gold. Okay. So, essentially what GJ is saying is that, given that he's been able to eke out value from wands that are cheap, and alongside the different stuck door mechanics, which reward spending energy to get lots of value from items and other things that are stuck doors are basically vaults, right? You have to spend 4 energy to get into them, and you find them throughout the underground. So basically, by spending MP in ways that get you small amounts of value, whereas you normally wouldn't from this MP, you can really get a lot of extra value. And that's pretty interesting, because there are plenty of wands in the Ground Gives Way that are niche, right? I would say Contaminate is an example of a niche wand. And you mix a couple of niche wands together, and all of a sudden you're generating real value out of your MP. So I could see your argument here of each MP being equal to an HP or even slightly greater. I think another aspect to that is how easy MP can be to restore at times. I mean, there's multiple ways, right? You have the night leafs that we just talked about. There's plenty of wizard potions and things. There's the powered circles on the ground. Sometimes you have fountains. All of that stuff. Finding a way to spend MP probably earns over 200 gold per rest. So if you're, 200 gold per rest, wow. And that's profit, right? So if we assume that if we spend all of our MP perfectly and we have 7 or whatever, we would expect to spend like 210 gold or whatever. And GJ is saying that essentially that means you're getting 200 extra gold on top of that cost, which is pretty powerful. When I see a night leaf, I see 200 gold at least. It's that easy. Yeah, okay. So that makes sense with what I just said. Super interesting that it's due to contaminate, which I feel almost no one is using. So I can say, that's BTS speaking, I can say personally that I haven't seen a lot of use for contaminate. So this is a new strategy to me. But that just goes to show, I mean, even I have a win streak going, and there are more strategies to add on top of what I'm doing. So clearly, there's more to this than meets the eye. So, okay. So we're saying that HP is about 25, maybe somewhere around there per. MP might be more, maybe up to 30. So would you like to claim MP equals HP equals greater than 25, or can we confidently claim MP is a little bit better? Sorry, I'm drinking some tea. It's tough because, there are times that you will go down to negative MP and it doesn't impact your run at all, right? Like, so let's say you get zapped, you step in iron stuff on the ground in lab or whatever. There are definitely runs where MP isn't used at all. So I think if you're spending your MP all the time, it's going to be better than HP when we talk about it like this. But maybe that's not always the case. Negative MP arguably has a way to find value from night leaves without 10 max MP. Yeah. What is that? Like a situation where you use a night leaf to get like 2 MP to cast some, I don't know, or maybe like 4 MP to get a accuracy ritual or whatever. GJ is going to set up a premise for us. Let's say you have 6 max MP. Okay. You can take 2 coil hits for free and night leaf. Yeah. Okay. Sure. And that lowers your max HP by I forget how much damage coil is. I think it's just 1, right? So that would lower you down to 4. Oh, is it 2 at range? Okay, right. That's right. And then it's like 4 up close. So, right. You would go to -4 and then to 6 again with the night leaf. That makes sense. So what you're saying in that sense is we're using negative MP essentially to gain value out of night leafs when maybe we weren't doing so before anyway. And then we can still cast those wands if we need to or whatever. I think that's the understanding. I feel great saying MP is greater than 30 gold, except in harder runs, it often finds around 0 gold for some rests. Fascinating. So you still think it's above 30 gold on average, even through the runs where you get no value out of it. For each MP, I mean. That is really interesting. I think Wizard Robe is really strong. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. If you find the if you find any good wands to go with the wizard robe, then it's really powerful, right? I think the same thing is true with the crown, obviously, but that's a rare weapon, or sorry, rare item. Mage rings don't feel weak despite high EP costs. That is very true, because you get a lot of MP out of those ring slots. And ring slots are cool and all, but I don't think they're like the most valuable slots, depending on your build. Like, stealth rings are pretty sweet, but mage rings are also really good, right? So, like, I wonder if a mage ring is just better than, why can I not think of the defensive ring right now? Somebody will remind me. Peace, ring of peace. Yeah. In general, from rings, I want minus noise, peace, or MP. That makes sense. I'll have the feeling that magic in general is too weak. Interesting, because I've been thinking a lot about how to buff all of those items. Ha! That's funny. I mean, even though the rings aren't the like strongest parts of the build, I do think that they're powerful. So I really don't know if they needed a buff. Kind of interesting. Or plus vision for missiles. Yeah, so for when it comes to range stuff, I find minus noise and plus vision are very, very powerful. Obviously, Ring of Peace is really good for like melee stuff, and then plus MP is kind of like the middle ground. It like kind of fits into all builds, which is pretty cool. This streak had a clear pattern of transitioning to selling metal armors. Oh, that's fascinating. They need many rests to be valuable. Less so with Night Leaves or Wizard Pot and Channel Service. Yeah, I found that I'm able to keep MP up very easily in the late game. I personally, my runs show up to lab with either a ridiculous amount of magic, or I just dropped it all because it wasn't useful to me. I don't really tend to have the runs where I'm like worried about casting too much stuff. To use plus magic or plus thievery. Sorry, this streak had a clear pattern of transitioning to selling metal armors to use plus magic or plus thievery instead, even more than I used to do. Now that makes sense. I do think thievery is a very powerful option in the current version. I've had many runs now with 0-1 noise, where all of a sudden you go through the late game, nothing spots you, you just walk through it. It's really not a problem. It almost feels overpowered, in my opinion. But the plus MP option, I personally don't have a lot of experience with. So it's interesting to hear GJ saying that was a valuable addition to his streak. BTS says, that's the main reason I added Night Leaves. I still feel they were not helpful enough. Getting 20 MP from a fountain or the powdered context thing is also superb. I'm kind of reading stuff out of order. We're kind of reading chat, guys, so I apologize if it's hard to follow along. GJ says, I think once common enemies stopped randomly doing spells, or dodging spells, MP became very good. Fascinating. Okay, so this is a change that I personally don't have a ton of experience with because I didn't play a lot of old versions of The Ground Gives Way. But if I recall, magic resistance used to be part of the game more commonly, and as a result, enemies would probably dodge more spells. So now magic resistance is much less common for the player and for enemies, so there's a little bit less dodging spells. I believe that's the story behind that. 15% chance to 25% chance in 2.5. Oh wow, there's a previous version. And some mobs had less. Okay. Hey Blue, what's going on? Welcome. We're just discussing GJ Streak, and we are recording, so just letting you know. Okay. Do we like wizard builds in 2.6? Personally, I do. I do think they're strong. My best wizard builds usually come at the cost of what's the dagger called? The rune dagger. because we spend tons of MP to stab things for 5 damage a pop. I think it's very powerful. Of course, there are many, many magic builds because there's lots of wands on top of that. But I do think that one is particularly strong. GJ says, I'm claiming MP is greater than HP, although max HP might be better than max MP. Yes, of course, because there's different values for, the current values. Sorry, there's different valuations for the current values of HP, MP, and EP, and also the maxes. Now, can't get more max energy, but you understand what I'm trying to say. The value of max HP will be discussed once gold cost of Risk of Ruin comes in. Great. So, anyway, I think we're still in the middle of discussing magic here. So, personally, I think Webs is an extremely powerful spell as well that only costs 1 mana. So, in that regard, I wonder what Webs cost per cast, because that alone is one of the best parts of Magic, in my opinion. I'm also curious what GJ has to say about that. 2 MP? Isn't Webs only 1? Yeah, Webs is only 1. So Webs, for those that don't know, is minus 10% melee, minus 10% block, and minus 10% missiles. So it's extremely powerful. That stacks as well. So for example, if an enemy has 50% melee, and you hit him 5 times with Webs, he can no longer hit you with melee attacks. Very strong. Now, if that means you're killing a powerful enemy, and you spend 5 MP on it, that could be hundreds of gold that you get from that, right? It depends on what the enemy is, but no enemy is going to have like more than 100% of any of these stats. So at the very worst, I mean, that's not entirely true, but it's pretty close. At the very worst, you spend like 10, 12 mana, and you've taken care of a lot of dangerous enemies. Permanent on sleepless enemies. That's true. Yeah, it's permanent on like elementals and things like that. Things that are dangerous to you. And that's valuable on all kinds of different builds too, right? It's not even just magic builds. Like Webs on a melee build is fantastic. It means you can kill all of the statues, for example, with no problems. It's extremely good on a stealth build that maybe gets spotted by something that you don't want to deal with. And then, of course, a magic build, that's like one part of their arsenal, usually. And one of the weakest parts of their arsenal, but still good. So, I hear us reaching an agreement that MP is greater than HP, so let's say above 30 gold per. I think I'm willing to agree with that. I mean, the more we talk about it, it seems like MP can be spent in all kinds of different ways to accrue value. Can't really say that about HP. So sure, I will agree. Now, EP is another stat with some variance to it. That's true. That is true. Especially since we say stuck doors are 4 EP, 4 energy, and they can have all kinds of different contents behind them. And sometimes there's different ways to spend the EP that are good or bad. Sometimes you rest at 10 out of 10 EP. That's very true. You're low HP, you couldn't spend your energy because maybe you didn't have something to identify, nor doors to open, anything like that. All of a sudden that EP is 0 gold, right? But stuck doors are probably one of the best ways to spend EP. Like if you compare, for example, identifying an enchanted item compared to opening a stuck door, right? An enchanted item could be cursed, it could be good, it could just be a terrible weapon that doesn't do anything for you, even if it is a good enchant. It could be an amazing whatever that is good with the enchant, right? So there's a huge range there, but it still costs 10 energy, which is very expensive. So, you could get maybe like 100 gold out of identifying an item after spending 10 energy. Or you could spend 4 energy at a stuck door and get like 250 gold, depending on what's behind there. Like sometimes you open the stuck doors and there's just thousands of gold in there, right? Like jewels and things. So, it might be that a stuck door is worth like 500 gold or more on average for 4 energy. Really, really powerful. So GJ is saying maybe around 50 gold per energy. Okay. I would also argue that equipment swap often gains more HP than you spend on energy, but it's not frequently a multiplier, just some gain. I see, just some linear gain, right? It is true that equipment swapping can be very powerful, right? Sometimes you take off your offhand. That gives you a little bit more ability to cast spells. That can matter in the moment. And then you go negative and just put your offhand back on, and it's just an efficient way to spend MP and energy. Man, this is making me... Blue says, man, this is making me want to stick all my doors. Jules, you say. Yeah. I mean, obviously finding jewels is one of the best ways to win The Ground Gives Way. If you enter the castle with lots of money, chances are you're going to be able to assemble some amazing build. So, I believe the game has a soft implication via apple pies and energize that... is that a potion? I can't remember. Or maybe that's a fountain, energy fountain. EP is equal to about half HP. Which I do disagree with. Sensor and service. Oh, right, the service. Right. Energize is the service to give you 10 energy. Right. I don't remember exactly what the base cost is for that, but so anyway, apple pies to gain energy just from regular apples, and then which is really cheap to well, it's not that cheap, but it's a little bit more expensive than a grilled apple, but it's still pretty good value. I think the chef upgrade is worth it on 2 to 10 EP alone. Yes. Yeah, so upgrading the apple pie from, a regular apple is 2 energy, right? You can upgrade it to 10 energy and I think 10 HP. Sorry, I'm trying to remember all the items off the top of my head. So just for the energy alone, GJ is saying makes that apple pie worth it. Then you tack on the healing on top of it, and it's just like insane, which I tend to agree with. I find a lot of the chef items are incredibly strong. So anyway, to reiterate, GJ is saying that he believes the game is trying to tell us that energy is worth half HP because of like how, for example, like the apple pie is 10 energy and 10 HP. It seems to be saying that the HP is the more valuable part of the pie, but that's not really the case. The energy is actually way more valuable than the HP in a lot of cases, and that I completely agree with. EP equals HP against fatigue. That's also true. So if you are dealing with enemies that fatigue you, so for example, goblins or water elementals, or there's a lot of options. Anything that fatigues you goes through your energy first before it gets to your HP. Yeah. So in that regard, energy is at least as valuable as HP, which makes it on average more valuable, right? My conclusion is that energy is greater than mana, MP, but not by any large margin. Okay. So to reiterate, I think GJ and I have agreed that HP is somewhere around 25 gold per. MP is somewhere around 30 gold. And then energy is probably somewhere around 50 per. And I think that makes sense based on the costs in the game. You think 50 gold is too high regardless? Okay, maybe I got ahead of myself there. 50 gold is too high regardless. I mean, so the upgrades for the cooks for the pies are they are a little expensive. I'm just trying to think of a good... I mean, so the energized service is usually what, like 75 gold? I can't remember. Is it less? Do you like 35 gold or 40 gold more? So I also am more inclined to ID enchanted items than you are. So I know that we're probably going to discuss that a little bit more later. But that would say to me that I value energy higher. We are in the territory of claiming water barrels are over 100 gold, by the way. Yeah, no, I kind of agree with that. I think water barrels are extremely powerful. I often save them for later in the game when I want to do like a bunch of like energy transitions or whatever. Like maybe I want to put on a bunch of stuff or read books or stuff like that, right? So I think water barrels are close to 100, are even more than 100 gold. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. So I would say 40 gold, personally. Yeah, I would say 40 gold. Okay, so once again, because this has been cut all over the place, HP 25 gold around, MP 30 gold, and now we're saying EP around 40 gold. So regarding the stats, we mainly conclude that energy is unusually good. Yes, I think that is the assessment that we can take away from this. And my inclination has always been that I valued energy more than the other stats. So hearing it put like that does make a lot of sense to me. I'm fine with that conclusion because of temp stack. Yes. So one of the reasons that we haven't discussed so far is the temp stack, right? Which is the idea that at some point in the game you stop resting and you just apply all of your buffs on top of you, and just try to become as powerful as you can. Now, one of the biggest problems with the temp stack is, of course, running out of energy. What do you do when you run out of energy and you can't rest? Well, there's a lot of ways to deal with it, including food, water barrels, lots of other stuff, right? So when you can actually deal with that lack of energy, the temp stack is amplified in terms of its power, right? And that can really just solve some runs for you. A good temp stack, even with like not amazing equipment, that's usually a viable solution for the late game. So anyway, I think the idea that energy is the most valuable resource makes sense. But it is worth noting that EP has a higher variance. That is totally true. There will be runs where you can't even spend your energy. Yes. Yeah, and we are including those runs in our evaluation. So it means the runs where you can spend your energy are that much better, right? Pretty interesting, I think. Okay. Next topic. Let's establish a basic average for gold needed to comfortably win a run, right? So one of the interesting aspects of gold evaluation or gold analysis is that you can usually come up with a specific amount of gold that will give you basically 100% odds of winning the run. It's more like, a limit that you approach, but 99.999% or whatever is close enough in my book. So how much gold is that? If a run gives you less than 1,000 gold value, are you winning? Let's see. So less than 1,000 gold value, we're talking like a stuck door in the run, maybe no vaults, maybe bad castle. You're having a hard time, right? There's still a couple of options. There's a lot of common items that that maybe are not high value in terms of gold, but are still more valuable than some of their counterparts. But 1,000 gold is really low. I mean, that's like an enchant on top of like a bad underground. And to specify, this is on top of what you start with. Yeah, the 4 food. So we're talking about 1,000 profit over your initial like spawn or whatever. It's your initial 5 food and like 30 extra stats. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Right. So we 30 extra stats. Wow, fascinating. Okay, I hadn't actually thought about it like this. That's very low value, 30 stats. If you had to translate that like directly into HP, we're talking about like 40 HP or whatever. And yeah, I don't think I could win the game with only 40 HP and not a lot of their help. So, obviously that's a very simplistic way to look at this view, but it does help you visualize like what do we actually need to win a run. If you get 90 extra stats, how do you feel? I mean, we're usually feeling a lot better, I think. 90 stats is a lot, right? I mean, that's like 30. Spending 30 energy if you're not IDing. Sorry, I'm starting to slow down. If spending 30 energy if you're not IDing enchanted items is a lot of energy. It's a lot of stuck doors. That's a lot of items equipped. It's pretty good. That's pretty good value. Is that enough to win the game? It's tough. 90 extra stats, you say? I think even if you had to brute force with 90 extra stats, you could probably still pull it off. I think it would be rough in that situation. But when I put it like that, it makes me think that the average case would be rather optimistic. I really liked the 2K approximation I had during the streak, but it's probably more of a low ball than a high ball. Really? Oh, that's interesting. Huh. Yeah, I mean, 90 extra stats, we're looking at like, what, 2,800 gold, 2,700 gold, somewhere around there. Um, and like you said, we were approximating 2,000 during your streak, but now you're thinking that that's a little low. I think claiming you need 3K also assumes a player is lacking in some way. 3K is a lot, right? 3K, now we're looking at probably closer to 100 stats. Now, 100 stats, obviously, is an arbitrary unit of measurement because they're all differently valued. But it just implies that you're getting pretty far through the dungeon being able to spend that many stats, right? So it does seem like the upper bound of 100 stats is pretty strict, right? Like, do you really need more than that to win a run? I don't think it makes sense. I think, okay, so I would claim you need around 2.5 thousand gold, and that's probably closer to the highball estimate. Okay. Gives us like a 500 gold margin of error, right? 2,000 to 2,500 gold to win a run. And that's what, somewhere around like 80 stats? 75 stats? Assuming nearly optimal play, I guess you mean then, says BTS. And yes, that is the assumption, right? We're trying to take out the player part of the run in the analysis, right? If you had a computer playing with optimal information and like optimal strategy, how likely is it to win a run given the, items and everything that it finds and all that? So yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that makes sense. I definitely agree with less than 100 stats, which is around 3K, like we said. A GJ computer. Yeah, GJ mode. Exactly. This would not be the first game to have a GJ mode. So given that, GJ's fine-tuned this estimate a little bit closer to somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 gold. How likely is a run to actually accrue that much gold? Right? It would seem, based on the streak, that's pretty likely. And obviously, each run has a different way of assembling set amount of gold, right? So I think the discussion is going to be interesting as we talk about like what are the most consistent ways of assembling the amount of value you need, or sorry, the amount of value that you need. Man, this makes me want to continue my streak. So, if you can realistically play above 95%, finding 2,500 gold worth of value means that you can use it to negate at most 5% lose rate. Interesting. This implies a reverse of 1% risk of ruin costs over 500 gold. Okay, let me make sure that I understand this. Okay, so let's assume that we play better than 95, like we have a 95% win rate, just how we play, right? We 2,500 gold worth of value. That assumes, we found exactly enough gold to win. Then we should, in 95% of the cases, we will win in that regard, right? So finding 2,500 gold that you can use negates at most 5% lose rate. So that means that each of those percents of lose rate is worth 500 gold, right? Fascinating. In terms of evaluating risk-reward decision-making, you should not take a 2% risk of ruin gamble for anything less than 1,000 gold immediately of usable loot. So JJ continues, compared to Slay the Spire, where taking an elite with 4% risk of ruin is often worth it, because in that game, risk of ruin is far less valuable, around 30 gold per percent of risk of ruin. And we're saying that, and an elite is a lot of value in that game. So we're saying that risk of ruin, like taking gambles in The Ground Gives Way, is extremely risky unless you are like guaranteed to get a ridiculous amount of value from it. Like even a very low, like I might lose the game decision doesn't make sense unless there's a high amount of value at the end of said decision, possibly. AKA what this is boiling down to is being conservative makes a lot more sense in this game. Some of the math or implications become nonsensical if you assume a linear curve, but all that really matters here is that the magnitude of risk cost is high. And that makes perfect sense to me. The way that this translates into layman's terms is that the recent developing strategy has been to explore the underground kind of only as much as you need to. If you're good at assessing that there's a risky area in the underground, for example, maybe there's like a door with dogs behind it or whatever, avoiding that area until later when you can come back with no risk of ruin often is just what you need to actually find power and avert any problems later in the run. You don't have to take those risks, is what I'm trying to get at. So it's just interesting to see that translated into gold evaluation, right? How often, if I think I might die opening a room full of dogs with bushes, how often am I going to get 1,000 gold from the rewards in there? Very rarely, right? Like the bushes are going to be like apples. Sometimes they have thorns to prick you. You're probably not getting back what you spent by going through that process. So, in general, how easy do you feel it is to find 2,500 gold worth of value? We know that finding 4 to 100 gold on a single depth is not exactly unusual. Yeah. I mean, look, I think a lot of runs find way more gold than they need to run, or need to win. I mean, a lot, right? I think a lot of runs find 3,000-4,000 gold. So, I would say the runs that don't find 2,500 gold are quite rare, right? Because in those runs, things that are usually less valuable become even more valuable. Um, hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'd say it was a rare occurrence most of the time. We know that. Oh, sorry, we already read that. So, and I'm just thinking, right? Because in my head, I'm thinking about the gemstones that I found during my runs alone have been worth thousands, right? I had a run where I found a flawless diamond and got 3,200 gold in one gemstone. You know, um, what we're saying is that gem alone wins the run. You know, I knew you were going to bring up that flawless diamond. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Is where most of okay, wait. It's not clear to me from this streak is where most of the lose rate is coming from. Or do you think win rate is 100% and I'm going to continue to 1,000? I don't think win rate is 100%. I mean, there are certainly runs, I've run into them, where you don't get 2,500 gold. But I think most of the time you do, right? Um, Win rate could be 101% if there's a bug that duplicates your session. Okay, thank you, Luigi. All right, so let's focus on that. Okay. How often do we not find enough gold? Now, my win rate is probably not 95% before everything else. So there's definitely been runs where that's happened, where I've lost, and it hasn't been because I didn't find enough gold, right? So I'm also trying to think about that alongside this assessment. It's not impossible to enter lab with less than 200 gold. Yes, that's true. Sometimes you find the remaining value that you needed in the last 5 levels. Absolutely. Is that more common than, say, dying early due to finding too much late game value? Because if you ran out of food and HP before castle, you're also just dead. That's a good point. So I think if you tried to full explore all of underground, you would quite often run out of food and HP before castle. Given that avoiding exploration, finding what you need in dungeon, and then, making your way to the castle is usually pretty common. Um, I don't think very often the value is backloaded. I guess is what I'm trying to get at. I feel like usually you get something powerful up front. Something. Even a longsword is powerful, right? Um, and that gets you to the rest of your value. That when I put it that way, it sounds like it's backloaded. But what I'm trying to say is, I don't often feel like we don't get enough value in the early game to make it to castle. Generally, in my case, when I don't make it to castle, it's because I misplayed or I explored too much. It's not really because the value wasn't there. Speaking of backload, do you think it's at all frequent to reach Dungeon 1 with 200 gold and find your 2k later? Well, I guess it happens, yeah. There's a lot of times you enter in dungeon with like 200 gold, for example, and then you tackle a vault in dungeon later, like a gold vault. Or maybe you go back up to underground and tackle a dungeon vault, you know? Um, so actually, yeah, that does happen. Sometimes you dive really fast to dungeon, and then you get your value. So, yeah. I think we can claim that regardless of when you full explore underground, there's above 500 gold in there. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. In every case, there's above 500 gold in underground. Absolutely. But you maybe can't get all of that 500 gold or more initially, right? Maybe you can only get like 200 gold value or whatever, and then you have to come back later for it. Blue says that I felt before 2. Armageddon 2.6 blue. That once you found your first first two damage weapon, survival to at least the castle is almost guaranteed. Flaming bats notwithstanding. 2.6 changed a lot of weapons damage from 1 to 2. Yes, I have read about that as well, and I do believe that is impactful, right? Because many enemies have odd HP values. And I don't mean odd as in strange, I mean odd as in not even. And let's say you hit a dog who has 3 HP for 2, well, then he runs away the next turn, right? And you get an opportunity attack. If it has 5 HP, you hit him twice, same thing. So basically, the increase in damage, I mean, besides just being powerful, it also gets you to enemies fleeing faster, which has value for the same reason that Contaminate does. So, yeah. Anyway, GJ says, so let's ask this then. If there is way more than 1k value in Underground, are we ever losing that to the endgame? Losing that to the endgame. Do you mean like... Can you clarify that a little bit? As in spending it there? Oh, yeah. Failing to reach the 2.5k total. I see. Well, I've definitely had time... If by endgame you mean going through lab, which would make sense, I've definitely had times where I have not met the 2.5k total before lab, and then I find the rest of my values while there. But certainly there are times when you won't find that, or you'll have a particularly dangerous lab spawn that requires spending a lot of that gold, right? Heat Locator sells for over 500 gold. Heat Locator is completely busted. So, yeah. Absolutely. That item is so insanely good. How much energy is it again? It's only 3 energy? Somebody remind me. So, what Heat Locator does is it gives you detect humanoids and detect animals, right? So, it's a very, very good item. Now, alien tech is very valuable in terms of selling. Yep, that's true. I actually have never tried to sell the Heat Locator. Does it actually sell for more than 500? That's kind of amazing. That alone is like huge, right? But I think, okay, so 3 energy for the Heat Locator for these detect attributes. Detect humans and detect animals is like insanely powerful, right? If you can use that to avoid half of lab, that can secure you the win all on its own. Often closer to 800 gold. Wow! I mean, okay. We know that alien parts are just some of the best items in the game, hands down. A lot of them give you permanent attributes. The zap gun is just very powerful. Wow, the cost... Okay, so BTS has confirmed that the cost of the Heat Locator is 2,000 gold, but it is modified by the merchants. Which makes sense. So, if we could buy it, that it would cost 2,000 gold. So, given the gold analysis, I mean, obviously you can see how valuable this particular item is, just in all kinds of regards, right? It's one of those items that can nearly win you the game all on its own. It makes a lot of sense to me. So, yeah, anyway, the alien parts, you don't always get alien parts in a run, though, which is the reason why having a lot of value in them, in the alien parts, is kind of okay, because they're rare. So, I guess a good question is, how often do you get runs that are not getting the 2.5 gold before lab that then run into alien rooms to accrue the rest of their value? Because that would certainly make up some of the lose rate. Yeah? Question GJ, would you consider the alien parts worth exploring lab for, aka going out of your way to find? The answer is yes, if you need the value. And that makes sense, right? If we're saying we can't win without these alien parts, we don't have enough value, then the exploration, the risk of ruin is outweighed by the potential value, correct? Um, and it's a sliding scale in that regard. So, um, can we at least confidently make the following claim? If Underground has more than 1,000 gold, and lab loot isn't locked behind L2 or L3, these are rather the easy seeds than the difficult seeds. I think that makes sense. In other words, those seeds have very low frequency for lose rate, yes. Some completely random crap like door trap into teleported. Wait, door trap and then teleported into a challenge vault. Wow. Okay. You survived those before too. That's fascinating. So like even a run that you're like OP because you found a ton of gold early on, you can still survive the like lose rate situations, which are, for example, using a door trap and teleporting into a death scenario. It's very uncommon, and clearly, like Juge says, you can even still survive those situations, and maybe you even get gold out of it because a lot of those rooms tend to have a lot of valuables. Touching door traps comes at a cost, or sorry, touching door traps costs a lot of gold. I agree with that, especially because of what traps can do to your temp stack. Yeah, in later game, there are traps that can make your temp stack, that can ruin your temp stack. It can be very dangerous. Stop putting on metal armors and learn to love thievery. Yeah, the higher your thievery, the less dangerous those traps become, the more effective your temp stack is, and then, thievery can do a bunch of other crazy stuff as well, like snipe stuff off screen for 5 damage a hit, or everything's asleep and doesn't have to fight, you don't have to fight anything anyway. These are very common occurrences, it feels like. Teleport eyes are such a menace this version. Fascinating. It's funny because a lot of my wins have had metal armor on. We obviously play in very different styles, but it's interesting to see that my approach is also still working. I mean, I obviously am only at 13 wins, but there will probably come a time where I lose before 100 wins, right? So it probably is more optimal to avoid metal armor. Or it's more common to avoid metal armor, I guess is the way I should say it. So not valuing, Blue says, not valuing using noise plus plus to lure barbarians to open your door traps for you. Oh yeah, I read that with the completely worse intonation, but yeah, you can lure barbarians and stuff through traps with noise. I've definitely done that before. Yeah, better via flail than chainmail. Yeah, that's true. If you're going to go completely into noise, you play around it, yeah, with traps, like leading enemies into traps, or just giving yourself a ton of noise and just really high offensive power, killing capabilities. Thunder Flail is a great example of that. Weapons was very strong. So we've established that regardless of where you actually lose, most losing runs coincidence with a low value underground. Do you agree? Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, even just anecdotally, most of the runs that I've lost have been just to not getting enough value early on. The moment that I started diving more past underground, the higher my win rate went. So, and dying in lab, usually it's, even if it's like heavily against you, usually there are still ways to mitigate that, right? Like I one time had to deal with a water elemental with no good solution and ended up taking like 20, 30 stats worth of loss, right, between energy and health. But he can't sleep, right? So you spend a couple of food or 3 food or whatever, and you can actually deal with that enemy still. It's what I'm trying to say. If you're only losing when trash piles don't have an amulet of speed in them, don't touch them. until you have to. Like even pulling useless seeds from bushes is potentially risky. Yeah, yeah. Spending your HP on bushes or trash piles. I mean, even dead bodies uh, can be devastating, right? I mean, it's not usually the case that this works out, but if you spend 1 HP for 1% lose rate, or you gained 1% lose rate because you spent that HP, I mean, that's a ton of value you just lost, right? A ton. And a lot of times you just get absolutely nothing for it from the trash piles, straight up, right? And then you're forced to rest, and things just go terribly. Blue says, I will die on my trash pile hill, GJ. And GJ retorts, yes, you will die. um, so, with that in mind, rock piles, for me personally, are quite a bit safer. I don't think rock piles often hurt you, and they give you ranged utility, among other things. And GJ agrees. I think they can have like rats and stuff. Is that even true? Cave lizard. Yeah, you can get a cave lizard. That's true. Those do have 5 HP. U-file rock piles are bad because of electric worm. That makes perfect sense. Electric worm is one of the most terrifying enemies to see in the late underground because you usually don't have the tools to deal with them effectively. A lot of times you just avoid. So that makes sense that you wouldn't go through those piles maybe immediately. But yeah, cave lizards are slow. You can lock them behind a door or whatever. You don't have to kill them. They also only do 1 damage, right? I don't think they're actually slow, but what I mean is they you can run from them, right? So that's not really that dangerous of an enemy, you know. And if you get rocks, or you get heavy rocks, or whatever, it can be very good for your run. So I do see low risk of ruin for rock piles, and potentially good value. So, in terms of starting with full exploration of the underground, finding trash rooms is crap value. Yes, usually always bad until later. Finding first rock pile is fine. Yes. You find a bunch of rocks early, great. Now we're set to actually kill some stuff. So that's good. So that sets up the expectation of how the rest of underground is going to go. You know, you find an early trash room and you're like, shit, I don't have any value yet, and now I have to go through U2 or U3 or whatever. If we claim 1% risk equals minus 500 gold, then losing your first HP to a dog in order to find a bottle of milk is also pretty bad. Yeah, especially if you have to spend the milk, right? It devalues your exploration potential on deeper floors. Yes, that's true. That's true. There's also the idea that, you know, seeing a room and knowing it's filled with dogs is it's still exploring it, right? You know there's a room there. Maybe there's another room or two with it or whatever. And you know that value is waiting for you later, potentially. So the first unintuitive rule of the ground gives way. Don't full explore the first floor. Are we confident in that? Personally, yeah, I'm pretty confident in it. Just anecdotally, it's improved my win rate drastically. Not only that, it's very easy to tell most of the time which rooms are dangerous. Yeah, you see a bunch of exclamation points behind a door. You just don't open the door, right? And that maybe allows you to explore U4, U5 without having spent a bunch of food. So, you know, I've had U1s where most of the doors have enemies behind them, and I just go down the stairs, and that's fine. What about not even getting near the exclamation points if the downstairs are just there because of zombie hands? So, zombie hands are interesting because they don't run from you, yeah? They have 2 HP. A lot of the times they do 0 damage to you, but sometimes they can do quite a bit more. Not getting close enough to the doors to hear anything, just leave the damn floor. Yeah, I mean, Zombie hands don't do any damage the second you get any armor, basically, right? So why risk it? What's the point? You're going to get bushes, and you're going to lose all your value. Even if you find a rock room, and you had to fight a zombie hand to get through it, and he took 1 HP from you, it may not be worth it. It just may not even be a net positive. I had my streak die to a 10 to 0 zombie hand. That is horrifying. And then once U4 shows a challenge, go back. Wow. Yeah. Right? The second you're like, oh, there's an electric worm on Underground 4, but I have my 2 damage weapon now, or I have any armor, or I have magic, or I can thief, or any of that. You can go back to U1 and actually look for things that might give you the value that you need to get through U4 or U5. And if those bad things never present themselves on the later floors, well, then you can just go to dungeon, and then you're almost guaranteed to get better loot. Especially when you find the armory rooms or the weapon rooms or any of that. Fast plus 2 attacks. Yeah. The strangling hands can, because they're fast, they can do a lot of damage. The goblin monk we have at home. Yep. I'm curious to when the goblin guard becomes part of the discussion. I imagine that's soon. I believe the idea is the first goblin guard you see is minus 1,000 gold or some shit based on our current estimates. So, minimizing exploration to minimize goblin guards is probably positive in the long run. Goblin cat. I'd like to extend this principle to claim that rubbernecking underground depths while you still have 9 to 10 HP is just a misplay. You specifically want to blitz deep down without getting aggroed by anything. Yep. I absolutely agree. You blitz down like super speed to dungeon, find your first tool, and then you can come back up and not take any damage while you clear. You could essentially spend no resources to get the value later, or you could spend the resources early and get the same amount of value and essentially lose out in value in the long run. Makes perfect sense to me. After using your upper HPs to explore the deepest depths safely. Yeah, that's also true, right? Like you explore a bunch of floors, maybe you take 9 damage, maybe not that much, say 7 damage all the way down to even dungeon 2. Well, then you can rest and go back up, right? You've spent 1 food or whatever to explore all of those floors. That's really powerful, right? Just seeing more space per food is going to give you value. So yeah, I think we agree. I think we agree that that blitzing underground almost always is optimal. The blitzing technically has a downside, yeah, because resting is similar to aggravate 1. It's true. But not. It's similar. It's not quite as bad, right? Again, I wasn't really around for the aggravate mechanic, but essentially now when you rest, doors randomly open and close. Enemies can kind of teleport all over the floor and sleep. So if you left any enemies previously, they might now be blocking your way when you go back up or whatever. And monsters can spawn, yes. So you could also fill back up the floors that you've already explored. However, in a lot of cases, what you can do is rest on the floor that's most convenient for you to explore, or maybe where you know has the most loot. And then when you acquire said loot, you're more prepared for the rest of the floors that maybe have an extra monster or 2. So you lose less value there as well. In practice, though, the gold gain of out-of-sequence exploration is greater than spawning an extra enemy or 2. Yeah, exactly. If you spawn an extra rat and then you one-shot him, did you lose anything? No. So I would say that's most of the cases. How often are you spawning another electric worm? Probably not that often. Um, unless we have reason to believe that a 3 imp room in underground is the most likely lose con for a near optimal player. Yeah, imps are pretty terrifying right now. Yeah. Them in octopi, octopodes, however you want to say it. I saw 2 of those rooms during
Octopodes.
octopodes. Great. I saw 2 of those rooms during this streak and only had to fight 1 imp to get through. Fascinating. Um, Man, this recording has been going on for an hour. I kind of want to make sure it's not too big. Let me just check. It's going on my C drive. Just 1 second, guys. I apologize. So we're good. We got plenty of space. Okay. So almost seems from this combo that underground is more dangerous than dungeon when starting off. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are the times when you go down the stairs in a dungeon and there's a skeleton waiting for you and you don't have any weapons. That definitely happens, but in those cases you can go back up to the underground and start doing what we were saying earlier, right? And those are usually like the low roll runs anyway. Um, I think GJ says I think how you explore underground is higher impact than anything else, other than don't take lethal risks uh, over 0.5%, like risk of ruin. In terms of plays that are safe, how you sequence underground is probably the most important thing. Yeah, I could agree with that. I've definitely personally experienced runs where I say, okay, I've explored to D2, for example. I know U2 has this item. I know U4 has this room. I want to hit U4, then U2, then go back to U3, and then maybe there's a room on U1. Like the sequencing is always strange, right? Because it depends on what environmental factors are in the rooms. Like maybe there's fountains, maybe there's campfires, maybe there's water barrels, all stuff like that. And if you can assess the proper sequencing, you can usually take very minimal, like you'll encounter minimal costs while also accruing more value. Like maybe the water barrel is more valuable than it would normally be as a result. In terms, okay, sorry. In terms of plays that are safe, how you sequence U is probably the most important thing, including the timing of returning from underground to dungeon. That's true. You won't always full clear underground after going back to dungeon, right? Maybe there's a terrifying goblin room, like ice goblins or whatever in underground. In which case, you'll come back to that way later, right? Every time you find deflection on underground 4, you win without first fighting 10 dogs. So for those that don't know, the amulet of deflection is 30% contextual block. So basically, as long as your block is less than 30%, it's always 30%. And block is very powerful in the ground gives way. Blocks range attacks, blocks melee attacks, and it just completely negates them when it happens. So if you do 50% block, most of the time you're not taking too much damage from a distance, which is pretty cool. Even in melee, sometimes you'll counterattack, like there's riposte and there's shield pummel and all that stuff. It's pretty sweet. So anyway, 30% block in the early underground means that you can explore significantly better than you could before. Like rats are doing way less damage. The hands are doing way less damage. Like all the minimal enemies are all of a sudden not really hurting you, which is pretty awesome. So apparently dying to a zombie hand from 10 to 0 HP is a thing that can happen to a real person. Got him. But your 60% martial is pretty strong at dealing with additional spawns. Yes, that's true. Bleeding gold on ordered exploration is really bad, right? Just going through U1 through U5 and losing gold as a result can cost you the run. Absolutely. Certainly, if you find any real MP spend, the extra lamplight on U4 won't matter. So lamplights are enemies that will poison you. They usually do like 2 to 3 damage per lamplight that you run into. Just like guaranteed. So running into lamplights is not ideal, but it's more like a resource drain than something that usually kills you. Um, I think the 10-0 is a less likely outcome than taking 100 in Lagavulin. That's a funny Slay the Spire reference. Basically, it's not happening. Uh, I've read multiple zombie hand casualty testimonials. I can't say I've ever died to a zombie hand, so I don't know, guys. I don't know about any of that. It happens if there's enough people playing the ground gives way. If you have 1,000,000 monkeys typing on 1,000,000 typewriters, one of them will kill a frostfire flame bat elemental. It's true. Um, anyway, so just to quickly recap, 2.5k gold to win a run. The stats are worth between 20 and 40 gold each. Exploring the underground is precarious, and often it's better to blitz past it and go straight to dungeon, and then create a new order for exploring underground afterwards. Think that's where we're at so far. Getting risk management flashbacks. So, at the start of the streak and during 2.5, version 2.5, I claimed the important insight is that reaching castle or a lethal weapon in early dungeon is high impact. But we're seeing the gains come before entering dungeon. It's just wrong to full explore at start. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, I mean, wouldn't you say that reaching castle is still pretty high impact? Like, I guess I'm not fully understanding here. Like, the lethal weapon also makes a big sense, or big sense. It makes a big difference. How do we actually feel about that? Okay, let's talk about it. So, I can attest that I've had runs that were weak entering dungeon, D1 castle, and then I'm extremely disappointed by the castle selection. Right? That's happened. So in those cases, it's still made sense to explore that first before the underground. Interesting. If we know that the better exploration of underground already gains a lot of value, do we still push from D1 into D1 from U4, or do we start looking around? Looking around equals U4 back to U1 and U2. Okay, it depends on what we know about as threats. So you've said that a lot of times we want to dive without even assessing the threats, which I think makes sense. Doesn't it make more sense to always continue unless we see twisty stairs? For those that don't know, twisty stairs prevent you from using them during combat. So wouldn't it always make sense to continue diving as long as there's not like enemies in the way, to at least look? And twisty stairs are what prevent looking. So that always seems to make sense to me. GJ says not necessarily. Okay. Do we want to enter Dungeon 1 with 10 energy and nothing to identify? Floating eyes to confuse you? Floating eyes don't show up in Underground, do they? It's only Dungeon? Is that true? Can't remember exactly. I think there are plenty of dog slaying items. That is true? Okay, thank you. That argue in favor of full exploration of U2, but I think the rule is to still push for castle. Yeah, I mean, if you... Alright, you find a rapier. Is that enough to go slay some dogs in U2? I think not. Rapier is better versus monks? Yeah, that's true. I think not. I think most 1 damage items... That was my idea here, Blue, is to talk about 1 damage items first. So 1 damage items, I think, often do not say go back and explore right away unless you already have good defensive stats. Yeah. Now, if you find a hand axe, yeah, you go back, right? If you find, I don't know, uh, uh, staff. Whip's also better in D1. Yeah, for sure. Whips are way better against enemies that throw shit at you from range. That's so true. So I think what I'm gathering is a lot of the 1 damage items don't make sense for returning to clear underground. Yeah? And if you breach the 2 damage threshold, it's still not an automatic go back and clear, but it's a much higher chance. Like, if I find a longsword, a spiked collar, and leather boots, I might go back and kill dogs. I might go back and full clear U1 and U2. Just those 3 things alone. So now you mentioned twisty stairs, and that's important. Okay. Appearing next to a goblin monk with a 0-leaf aloe is a no-no. And aloe you can get in underground. That's true. That's true. From the bushes, yeah? Teleberries from the blink dogs, yeah? I think they also come from the bushes, but... Mm-hmm. So there are certainly situations where you say, okay, I have enough power to avoid risk of ruin, and as a result, I'm no longer taking a minus 500 gold percent, like a minus 500 gold deficit from attacking one of these rooms. Maybe there's no deficit at all, even. And then you're just gaining value for use in further exploration in like the dungeon or whatever. No healing feels so... Okay, hold on. I don't know if I talked about this, but Underground really hits different when you don't have at least 1 bottle of ale on you. No healing feels so risky. If you're far from the stairs at 6 HP, you're paying hundreds of gold every step. Now that's fascinating. I'm usually of the strategy of resting at 6 HP, right? Because I find, or even 5 HP, I find around there going any further, like exploration-wise, could be extremely risky. And if you haven't spent any energy, then that feels really bad resting it then. And that's only like 4 HP, 4 or 5 HP of buffer, right? And that just goes to show how bad these bushes can actually be. You know, you spend 1 or 2 HP on bushes, you have to rest. You just spend a ton of food. It's terrible. If we know that energy is the most valuable stat, resting at 4 out of 10 HP and 0 EP is already very, very good. Yeah. We're saying, okay, 4 HP and 0 EP at our average, right, is, 150 gold from the HP, and then literally like 400, like, so it's like 550 fucking gold to rest when you're at very low stats. That just goes to show how valuable the food actually is, right? Each point of food can be nearly 600 gold, right? If not more. Because you get MP too, right? I didn't even count MP in there. Now, of course, yes, it has the gold downside from mobs being spawned. That's very true. However, let me ask you this question, because I think this is important. Resting before you explore further areas can be really good. Yeah? So, like, imagine you're at, U4, and you're about to go down to U5. Well, when you rest on that U4, you haven't spawned U5 yet, so there's no new monsters that are going to spawn as a result of you resting on U5, because you haven't spawned the floor yet. So, resting actually gets worse the more floors have been generated, right? Sort of trivial with portals, it's true. Given I think resting works on aggravate 1, you might want to rest before entering. Yes. Yeah, so I find, personal strategy for me is resting right next to downstairs can be very strong. Often you don't spawn anything right next to you near the stairs anyway, and then it just it just means that you're not affected by the downside of the rest on the next floor. And I think that's very important. Just a small strategy that I haven't really heard talked about before. Interesting. Okay. Blitzing in Underground has completely different motivation. Castle can be on D1. Sorry, let me restart. Knowing that, how obvious is blitzing deep for Castle actually? Because blitzing in Underground has completely different motivation. Castle can be on D1. I think if you make it to Castle with 8 HP and only 1 rest spent, there wasn't much downside. Like the idea that resting gets worse the more floors you explored isn't really that impactful. And neither is the the opposite of that. The less you rest, the better. Or sorry, the higher you are, the less effective rests are. The more effective. God, I'm talking myself in circles. The deeper you are, the less effective rests are. Like that isn't always the case necessarily, right? So that's what I'm trying to say. And if you do blitz into a castle on D1 and it gives you everything you need to fully explore you immediately, then, that's an insane amount of value, right? So I agree on rest being less valuable later on. Early temp stacks are great. Yeah, sometimes you can temp stack as early as just finding the castle, like on D1. That's definitely happened to me. In which case the rest, disappear. So yeah, actually that makes sense, right? Because you're eventually going to want to stop resting altogether. The farther you go down, the less valuable rests get, unless there's like bedrolls and things, and that kind of changes the strategy. Bedrolls are insanely overpowered, by the way, just like ridiculously overpowered, and they're so broken that they completely change this discussion in terms of temp stacks, right? Sometimes you will literally avoid temp stacking because you can get so much value out of the bedrolls, right? We can make a general claim that you want to quickly exit Underground, but also go back sort of quick. So I like blitzing dungeon for a lethal weapon. And yes, I've grown fond of the early boost fountain to grill apples. Early boost fountain's pretty cool, right? It's kind of like finding something that will protect you for the Underground, right? Boost fountain and like a rapier are all of a sudden all you need to explore Underground and get all the value you need for the rest of dungeon and more. So, Blue, you're talking about Underground temp stacks? I think if you like run out of food or whatever, it can be a thing, but I don't know if you really want to start that early. I think the earliest you usually want to start a temp stack is right after Castle. So, sometimes dungeon has so many stuck doors, yeah, easily found via scroll of exits, that you want to eat the apples. So grilling them comes sooner rather than later. Fascinating. Blue says, I've had pretty good successes with Underground temp stacks, honestly, especially when I don't find a damage 2 weapon early, no meme. If you're not finding Castle trivially, you should temp stack to reach it. So this is interesting because I know GJ is more likely to quaff potions and read scrolls unidentified than I am. And as a result, I bet that means leaning more into temp stacks should you roll favorably on said potions and scrolls. So, whereas I tend to hoard and then use my temp stack later. So it's interesting to see that, like, if you recognize early that you're just not having a good time finding Castle, then even using those potions and scrolls can lead into a temp stack, which gets you there, and then all of a sudden you haven't really lost any value. Maybe you've gained value. We've established that identifying a scroll costs 10 gold or 100 gold. Yeah, I guess we have, right? Yeah. So I mean, it's more, right? Like 120 gold. Identifying not wands and rods is mainly justified by EP going to waste otherwise. So what you're saying is that as far as identification goes, the cost is only worth it for magic items unless you would lose the energy because you have to rest anyway, which is hilarious because the argument behind that is that the curses on enchanted items are sometimes not bad, not that bad, and it's actually worth to just like use ID enchanted stuff. That's like the background of that argument. I think that's very interesting. Um, I think you should be a bit suspicious of those items too. Mm-hmm. Sure. Um, I mean, are you not ever worried about reading like a scroll of starvation? That's kind of what I have to think about there. Let's discuss the gold cost. Yeah, that's the big one, right? Scroll of starvation is terrifying at times. Um, let's discuss the gold cost of negative outcomes from use ID. Oh, perfect transition. So scroll of starvation, if you have 4 food, for example, that scroll puts you to 0 food and gives you a bunch of rep. Okay, so that's devastating, right? We just decided that a food might be worth like 600 gold. So you lose 4, you just lost literally the amount of gold that it takes to win the game, right? Like that's horrifying. And losing 5 food in that situation might just you might never recover from this. Now, obviously, that's a rare scroll. I believe it's rare. It might be very rare. Um, so, if this happens 10% of the time, use IDing, then it's really only like a 250 gold cost, potentially, right? I don't know the exact values, but that's just my guesstimation. Anyway, GJ says, in general, you cannot use ID scrolls unless you're running low and have food in inventory. Food in inventory to recover from a scroll of starvation, and then running low because then you won't really lose too much if you did get hit by one of the big downside scrolls. Identify on scrolls and underground before resting is quite good. Knowing phasing can be huge, right? It can be huge. It can get you away from dogs. It can get you away from skeletons and things in dungeon. All kinds of dangerous melee stuff. Let's say you want a temp stack and starvation is trivial. What other downsides are there? I mean, there's destroy weapon, right? Which you can mitigate by just taking your weapon off. There's summon monster. Summoning, I mean, it's not really that bad. Yeah, not that bad. There's not a mutation scroll, right? That's just a... Is there a potion? Mutation potion? I can't remember exactly. If you take your weapon off, you cancel the chance of enchant wep. Oh, that's true. Yeah, Scroll of Chaos, that can mutate. Thank you. Scroll of Chaos is... it's pretty unlikely that it mutates you. So... yeah, you could put on a worse weapon. I mean, I've read a lot of Chaos, and I've never had it mutate me. So, absent tentacles. I've actually, what have I only been mutated one time? I don't even remember what I got. The worst roll after starvation is blindness. Blindness, right. So blindness, it hits your vision, but it gives you what? Telepathy? Is that how it works? It gives you something. I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, a bunch of detect stuff. Right. So, which is great, as we discussed earlier. Detect is very good. So yeah, scrolls are super readable once you've mitigated the downsides. Yeah, which is possible a lot of the time. One of the general strategies for the ground gives way is to hoard your food in your inventory so that, for example, hungry eyes can't deplete it. So you're at 0 food the whole time, they can't deplete it, and then when you actually want to rest, you just eat the food. And in those situations, I mean, Scroll of Starvation is just straight positive. You just give yourself rep. Um, so scrolls in particular, I don't disagree that they're often good to use ID for sure. Often good to use ID. Now potions, I think, are a completely different story. There are a lot of potions you don't want to be drinking. Um, Potion mutation is much more common than chaos mutation. Yep, yep. And then drinking like some of the poisons by accident, like ice blood or whatever it's called, is awful, right? Like these potions could end up carrying your run. Um, you drink your potion of life in the wrong time, you're kind of sad. Maybe not like the most sad, but you're kind of sad. Um, how much does the average mutation pot cost you? It's a good question. I know there's more bad mutations than good mutations. So, as your chaos sugar. Mm-mm. I mean, the only good mutations are like ostrich legs. I don't even know. What are the other ones? I haven't got mutated that much, so I guess light bulb head's okay. Big brain, yeah, okay. So like, there's like 12 mutations that I can think of, and like, 25% of them are okay. Claws are arguably not horrible. They're okay. Yeah, they're not amazing, but they're okay. Um, you guys were talking about how much you like MP. Big brain is top tier. I mean, losing your head slot is never that great. So claws are horrible. You lose rings, but blue. The thing is, we were just talking about how rings, while valuable, are not like they usually don't make or break the build. Usually, sometimes they do, but like there are runs where you just don't find any rings, and it's like, all right, whatever. You win other ways. Um, I don't want to say they're the least important part of a build, but I don't think that they're like the most important part. Oh, I remember. The only mutation I've gotten is missing finger, and I still won that run. So that's a great indication of like how useful rings actually can be, right? But obviously it depends. If you get like a stealth ring and that's like the core of your stealth build, then sure. But I find most of the time rings are supplementary. I feel like this is a poor logic argument. Feel free to rebut it. You got all the brain power in the world to discuss it right now. Sometimes you can buy a mutation cure for what? 400 to 600 gold? It's expensive. Yes, it's very. I mean, I've seen like 300, but it's expensive. Um, so like there are times where you could get like a bad. I'm air quoting here. A bad mutation uh, that carries you until you can remove it and then replace it with something good. Um, you can't just say, "Hey, I won one run with missing finger. Rings aren't valuable." That's not exactly what I said. I was just saying that like that's the only mutation that I've gotten, and I still didn't really have any problems with it. So it's more that like rings are not. I never lose the game because I'm missing rings, right? At least it hasn't happened to me yet. So maybe that's anecdotal, but that's kind of what I'm getting at. Um, if I recall, claws also lock you out of gloves on top of rings. Is that true? I think so. I don't know. I can't actually remember, but it would make sense. But yeah, I mean, obviously, any mutation that loses you like important slots, like weapons, is really rough. And losing 4 slots is, I mean, we just said we like claws are how much damage? Are they 2 or 3? It's 2, right? Or is that scissor hands? Um, slow is oh my god, slow. Yeah, probably around minus 1,000 gold for sure. Perma slow is horrible. That's kind of the problem with the amulet of inertia, which is something I'd love to talk about as well. Extremely high block and knockback immunity for permaslow is pretty bad, but sometimes it can be okay. Might be fun to talk about here in a minute. Um, also, scissors give noise malice. Yeah, that's true. So can we get a consensus that getting mutated costs at least 500 gold on average despite good rolls? Yeah, I mean, easily. Even the good rolls, like how much is fast worth for the for a leg slot? That's the best one, right? How much does that cost? Is that is that plus 1,000? It's pretty good. It's probably more like plus 750. I don't know. I like fast. I think fast is one of the best stats of the game, if not the best. Uh, Probably less good than slow is bad. Yes, I agree. I agree with that. Um, so if we think the best one is like 750, and then like the next best one is like 250 tops, and then like the rest of them, like many of them are minus like 500 plus. I think several of them are minus thousands. Losing a ton of slots is minus thousands. So yeah, I think I agree that on average mutation is like minus 500 gold, especially if you think about the cost to cure them, right? Um, I would love to kick over chaos fountains. It's really funny. Potion of mutation is rare. Yeah, it's true. So what does that mean? 15% spawn? Mutations are meant to be mostly bad, just fun upsides sometimes. I figured that was the case, and I honestly think that's balanced. I would prefer it like that. There's a lot of potion types. It's way less than 10%. Okay. Mutation percent goes up on less potions in the pool. That makes sense. So let's just say you haven't identified any potions, yeah? Chance for drinking mutation potion is, can we say 5%? And if it's minus 500 gold, 5% of that says it's a minus 25 gold on average. Yeah? It's kind of interesting, right? Minus 25 gold. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of other potions that are similar. And that's the worst potion. Yeah? Obviously, it goes up every time. But it makes you think that on average, quaffing is positive. Yeah? Um, I like the time potions in U4 when poison or disease because antitoxin, both healings, curing, restoring. Makes sense. There are several potions that fix status effects, right? Especially poison. I feel like poison has so many. Like poison's like really, and bones too. Like I feel like poison is almost a non-threat after underground, like most of the time. Yes, quaffing a restoring potion is terrible sometimes, right? Once you have your temp stack, it's not even useful. Uh, but sometimes it fixes some horrible downsides for you. So yeah, I agree. It can be minus 500. It could be like, if restoring fixes your temp slow, excuse me, if we say perma slow and a slot lost is 1,000 gold minus, what is temp slow? 250? Like minus 250? I guess it depends on how. It could be 50 gold if you rest, sure. And then there's like Rod of Restoring, there's the fucking balance pot. Yeah, it depends on balance, yeah. You want to say 250 to 50, like somewhere around there? I think that's kind of reasonable. I don't know. If you can't get rid of it, though, then it's like, horrifyingly bad. So it could be even worse. Interesting. Um, anyway, so potion use can be done early and to a small extent, but it's clearly worth it despite mutation. Yeah, I mean, when we put the math to it like that, it really does sound like potion quaffing is just going to be a better use of the potion than spending energy on it and then saving it many times. Not always, because sometimes you'll have energy to spend for free because you're like resting or whatever, but often. And also, you could use it to clear up inventory space for no cost and energy. Sometimes you take damage. Sometimes you get poisoned. Sometimes you lose your weapon buffs. These are all bad. And sometimes you waste your life pot. But it's still probably good most of the time. So we found the cases where potion scroll is high use magnitude, good or bad. What about gear? Okay. So, I used to be a believer in identifying gear, just because sometimes removing enchants can be a problem. It's like expensive. Um, and sometimes you have the energy to spare and all that stuff, right? But then I had a run where I got a helmet of, I don't know, was it Anger? Berserk? I can't remember exactly. The downside was literally noise or whatever, and it just gave me bloodlust on my already amazing melee helmet. So ever since that run, I've been thinking, a lot of the curses are actually pluses, right? Even if some of them are pluses, that already adds to the blessing pool, yeah. Yeah. So what are the worst curses? There's slowness, which is only on boots. Is that correct? Healing is weapon. I know all of the enchants depend on the slot as well. So, what that means is you can kind of estimate based on the item slot how likely use IDing is to be negative, right? And it really does depend on the slot. It's not just in general. I agree. Helmet enchants are very good most of the time. Frostbite on shields is bad. That's the negative cold res one, yeah? Minus 50, I believe. It does seem pretty bad. Worst from head slot. Is there I know there's a vision, a blinding one, right? Oh, stupidity for minus 5 MP. I don't think I've ever seen that one. So, what is that? A minus 150 gold right there? Which can easily, outvalue any benefits from the gear that you put on, right? So that's pretty bad. Most of the time, that probably ends up at negative 100. Interesting. But negative 100 is really not that bad as far as because you're not spending 10 EP, right? 10 EP based on our estimates is 400 gold. Yeah, so minus 100, really not. Well, you still have to put on the item, so it's probably two energy or so on top of that. But the point is, it's still better than spending the EP. So you just put on a knit cap before going into a cold area. Or sorry, if you're actually spending EP, you just put on a knit cap enchanted before going into a cold area. And most of the time, even if it's negative, you're still getting something useful from it. Unless you're unusually confident in winning by keeping it in inventory or via dropping it. Yeah, what GJ is getting at here is the downsides of the enchant are far outweighed by the fact that, for example, a knit cap, 25% cold res is just extremely good just on its own in cold areas, right? So it's contextual based on what you're about to encounter. Even if you got the worst fucking curse on your helmet, the 25% cold res more than makes up for it. 10 EP is quite bad to spend most of the time. And yeah, it's true. There are definitely times where I've identified enchanted items and I'd be like, man, now I'm really short on energy and I didn't really get anything out of the item. So fascinating. Question here. If it wasn't possible to use unidentified gear, would you pay 6 energy to use ID in some cases? Yeah, I think I would. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, that gamble no longer exists, and now power is gated behind 6 energy at a time, right? So now we're equating the energy value to the average value of uh, an enchanted item. Now here's the thing, though. Curses all of a sudden become highly, like, they don't do anything, right? So like every item would be blessed. 6 energy is always well spent then. So does energy become more valuable then? 50 gold? 60 gold? You don't even want to spend energy on anything else at that point, right? You just want to put it into your enchanted items. Seems really interesting. Positive enchant is 300 gold average. It's a good return on EP. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think so too. I don't know, BTS. My thoughts on that are I kind of enjoy the fact that some of the curses are like bad but also good. I think that adds a lot of flavor and like kind of fun mechanics, right? But I guess my thoughts here are maybe some of the curses should be a lot more detrimental, right? It just seems like the real problem here is that use IDing is nearly always positive, right? And maybe the curses should be just worse in general in order to make spending the energy more attractive. Spending the energy to identify, that is. I can't believe you're summoning the slimy curse from the depths of 2.5. Yeah, I mean, that'd be bad, right? That'd be really bad. Slimy. Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, let's put some problematic mechanics in there, right? Like I'm trying to I'm trying to think of some like good curses that I would add on top. I'll have to come up with something later, but um, want my slimy boots back? Equipped very fast is worth never changing gear again. That's funny. Is there a slot other than head with unusually low downsides? Good question. You know, I really don't have a lot of experience with curses because I've identified so much. So, um, I'm not the right person to ask about this, unfortunately. Pacifism on arms. I mean, there's stuff that, as far as I know, like lowers resistances, lowers like I know I've gotten one on shields that lowers block. I've had weapons that I can't remember exactly. I think some weapons become just completely unusable, or maybe get like lots of noise. I think I've had weapons with more noise. I think arms aren't that bad if you have lethal weapons, but minus 10% melee does hurt. Yeah, yeah, that'd be pretty awful for a curse, I think. Wait, of the dead. What does that do again? Of the dead. Doesn't that give you detect undead or something? Oh, minus 99 MP. But scare undead? Yo, that's totally worth it. Like scare undead is insanely good, right? Um, I don't know. I don't like skeletons. They might be the best roll. So the cursed item sells for a lot? Fascinating. Um, yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of really good options on gloves then. Do seem worse than head to roll on. Weapon has high upsides, but there could be some really bad ones, right? Like healing might just throw your run. Like that. There's risk of ruin attached to use IDing enchanted weapons, no? Just in general. So you see a flail enchanted on Underground 1. What do you do?
So what's going on here?
Hey Crackle, we're actually recording right now, so just to let you know, we're discussing GJ's 100-run streak that is ongoing in the Ground Gives Way. So let's say you say the flail. It's enchanted. At the very least, it slays dogs without healing. That's true. But you need to cast magic missiles on goblin guards to insta-slay them. Yeah. How does it work exactly, the healing? You do the damage and then it heals them? Is that how it works? Damage and then heal, yeah. So you can, if you can overkill, then you can avoid the healing, but you have to play around that, and that's difficult. One could also argue that the flail isn't cursed. There's something about a good flail winning the run anyway. Yeah, flail is one of my favorite weapons, actually. It's very powerful in general. So there's something to be said about, like, how common is healing? Right? Is that another 10% on the enchants? Like, if we say healing is minus 500 or some shit, okay, I'm just making that up, then at 10%, it's still not that bad most of the time. Not many curses for weapons. Yeah, I'm not quite exactly sure how the enchantment mechanics work. Like, is there always a certain number of cursed items or whatever? Not certain number, but like a certain percentage. Like maybe it rolls to see if it's enchanted or cursed, and then it rolls for the type. It's random among what's available. Okay. So essentially, you just have them all in a big pool, and you just choose one. I see. With rarities, right? Okay, gotcha. Okay. Um. So the curses have rarities too. Fascinating. I'm curious what they are. Like, how rare is healing? But you don't have to tell us, obviously. So, how often do you uniquely lose a run because you equipped a healing flail? I really wonder. Hard to calculate frequencies. It's quite easy to lose all of a sudden. Worse than slow. The one time I didn't lose. Interesting. That's what I'm saying. I mean, a lot of enemies have 3 HP. And it's not like the Thunder Flail is bad. I mean, Thunder Flail's fucking awesome. So, like, if you upgrade your cursed flail, even if his healing is even bad anymore? Like, I don't know, right? So I'm not even sure. It's like, obviously the flail is a powerful weapon, but I'm not even sure that the worst curse on it is really as bad as it normally is. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, let's say that you can jam on head and missile slots kind of casually. Yeah, sure. The upside of a bow at all beats minus 10% missile. That's so true. The missile curses are certainly not that big of a deal. I don't think weapons are in this tier as anything else, because most other things I like to equip once there's any disenchant source. Body slots are often great, right? Usually the downsides aren't so bad. It's like you lose some armor or you lose noise or something. Gain noise, sorry. Minus 2 HP can be half negated by the item itself. Yeah, exactly. If you ever find like plate mail with a little bit less armor, it's not that big of a deal, right? So, or maybe it's like, why can't I think of the thief robes? What are they called? You know what I'm talking about. If you have like a thievery robes with minus armor attached to it. Yeah, the velvet robe, thank you. If you have a velvet robe with minus armor attached to it, it might as well not even be a curse, right? The 400 gold common item. Yeah, velvet robes are also extremely powerful. Wow, they're good. Just so good. So, yeah. I think it also, the curses, it depends on what type of build you're going for, whether or not they're even valuable. Like, if you get noise on your thievery build, you're having a bad time, right? But if you get noise on your armor build, whatever, who cares? It's just interesting how the blessings and the curses are, they change in value depending on what archetype you're moving into. Imagine not selling plate armor to put on velvet robes. It's funny. Like right now, let's fix some of the misconceptions about thievery, because we are chronologically in D and need to discuss builds as we're encountering NPCs to invest in. Okay? It's weird to claim that 100% armor and 0 noise are unusually good. This should be controversial. Because now you're seeing diminishing returns from any other scroll of silence or armor orb. That's true, but, I guess you could say that's like over winning, right? Winning too much. But if investing into those things gets you to those orbs anyway, does it matter? I think some of those things also prevent against like bad traps or whatever. Not that matters at 100% thievery, but you know what I mean. You should realistically be winning 3 noise runs as often or more often. I want to claim -1 noise is almost linear in value and largely independent of build. I don't know about that. You telling me your Thunderflail build benefits from minus noise? You take off the flail for traps? It's like 5 energy to put on, isn't it? What? How much is it? I thought it was a lot. Maybe it's 3 energy? I don't know. It can't be 1, can it? Largely independent of build. I mean, plate mail builds, I've had builds that go all in on noise. And those really... Like, I know what you're trying to say, that we're leaning against, or leaning away from melee builds and all that. Is the flail really 1 AP? That's crazy. Crazy. I think the Thunderflail's more, though. Right? Wait, lightning fills can drop? I didn't know that. That's interesting. So anyway, I don't know. I just don't think noise, like, once you're above 10 noise is kind of irrelevant, wouldn't you say? The implication of this is in 90% of runs, you sell metal armors to put on the common minus noise items. Why would you be above 10? I mean, there are runs where you don't find any minus noise, yeah? Those exist. So then noise, invest in the 7 or 6. I would like to discuss this because I feel like if you have 100% armor and 100% block, you really don't care how much noise you have, like at all. Hell, you could even throw some magic res in there with wizard pots, right? The problem is claiming 100% armor block is unusually good, implying you will lose a run with 80%. With 80% what? Sorry. 80% of either of those? I see what you're getting at. You could have just had less and invested more into minus noise. How true is that? So 100% block and armor allows you to not have resources to maintain your build. There is some value in that, right? Now you don't need many like food items. So there are times when you're low on those resources, and as a result, you will go further into your 2 defense attributes. It's still just 20% more damage mitigation. 80% of the time, it does nothing. So are you saying that you think that there's a value where any more block or armor or whatever is just severely diminished. For block, for armor, it's different. Okay. Yeah, I guess block is either all or nothing. Armor is not the same, right? Armor or block is very binary. And if 80% of the time you're all, is that really that much worse than 100% of the time you're all? Not really. But there are times you know, uh, you run into a water elemental or whatever, and you miss the block 3 times. And then you're really sad, right? Because there are some enemies that, if you don't hit your blocks, can severely fuck you up. We're talking knockback. We're talking, fatigue for losing your energy. So you're losing like your most important stats because you didn't have 100% block. 80% armor is very different against statues, for example, sure. You have plenty of water elemental solves, including projectiles. Or just resting. Sure. I mean, obviously, you'd rather have 100% armor against earth elementals than 100% block. Is that true? I think so. So block is really just for like elemental damage that's either ranged or melee. Does that make sense? I think so. All the 100% block or 0 noise obsession sounds like is I will throw the run with absolute protection against Pepcac. Let me ask you this. Have you never felt runs were dangerous at noise 3 versus noise 1? I've had some of those. Like, you have to play a lot more carefully at noise 3 than noise 1. Plenty of them finished at 3 or 6. I'm not saying it's impossible to win, but like 6 also is totally normal. I wouldn't say 6 is like a stealth build anymore, right? 3 could be temp 0. True. True. But it seems to me that once you go lower than 4 noise, you've given up most of your other mitigation. So the times that you do get heard or spotted are very dangerous, wouldn't you say? The argument here is paying 200 gold for 1 noise is just good. And it gets worse the less noise you have, not the other way around. Fascinating. I would figure it'd get better. It seems to me that, okay, if we put it this way, it's like a inverse bell curve, yeah? No, it's a bell curve. Sorry, it's an actual bell curve. So it's like less valuable the closer you are to 0 noise, and then like somewhere around like 5 noise it peaks, and then once again, once you're at like 16 noise, it's also very valuable. Interesting. I guess the idea is that in optimal play it shouldn't matter, even though 100% armor and 0 noise makes it much, much easier. Sure. Yeah, sure. Like, you should have the resources that you don't need to push to those finalities, right? We don't need the excessive defense or whatever. What I'm also trying to say is the meta is don't bring metal armor into lab unless you're unusually afraid of water elementals and or can't sell it. Because the velvet robe is 400 gold and sells for 0. Sell your expensive defensive gear, put on your noise stuff. I see what you're saying. By putting on the velvet robe and gaining 400 gold, you've inherently made other minus noise that's like 250 gold from a trainer, for example, less valuable. Just because you're approaching 0. Interesting. You rather use metal armor temporarily, and this armor that doesn't buy your items is a low roll. Yeah, okay. I've noticed that any merchant, not just merchant, but like any NPC that doesn't buy items is like a huge hit, right? Selling gold is extremely powerful, and the ground gives way. Extremely powerful. And that's also why I like some of the changes for, in this version where like commons aren't worth anything or whatever. That definitely incentivizes less hoarding. But I almost wish things didn't sell for as much to even more disincentivize it. and because it seems very strong right now. What if heavy armor granted elemental resistances like in very old versions? I find that okay. So personally, in my heavy armor builds, finding resistances is like the most important thing, right? Finding magma stones, finding ice blocks, scrolls of resistance, all that stuff is amazingly important on armor and block builds. I find like it's less important on thievery builds and like magic builds also feels less important because they can like cast their own resistances or they could just like be at extreme range or whatever. There's like all these ways that resistances are not as impactful on thievery and magic builds. So it does seem like adding resistances would make heavy armor better. I would like to make pure melee builds and pure magic builds better. Making it sell for less maybe doesn't have the same impact. Because it certainly means we don't hoard it as much, but I think it just means people like GJ don't even pick it up then, right? That said, I've had a lot of success with high armor and block builds. Granted, I probably have overwon those runs as we discuss this, so maybe that's again not that important. Considering Thievery had 2 times returns in 2.5, I blame the misconceptions about Thievery stat entirely on whips. If you main a sidearm, Thievery isn't quite OP enough to not throw the run. I'm not sure I agree. Can we just talk about the fact that arrows are like the most broken thing in The Ground Gives Way for a second? Like, upgrading your arrows is the most cost-efficient way to win the game. Oh, speaking of the old misconception. Okay, got it. Wait, people used to think Thievery didn't work? What? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Noise training isn't worth it. That's really weird. I've thought they've just been insanely powerful since the moment I saw them, so very interesting. So if you look at whether your thievery stat makes your whip good, you will come to the wrong conclusions. I mean, frankly, I'm not a huge fan of whips because I do feel like thievery requires a kind of like critical mass before whips are even useful. And that's like less the case for daggers and bows, by the way. But once you reach that critical mass, then whips are very strong, right? I've only had like a couple of those runs, though. I like whips more if I have a scroll of silence. Yeah, sure. Any like huge noise stack makes whips really good. Whips require critical mass, so does pickpocketing. Thievery never has. Yeah. Although not really. The downsides of pickpocketing can be highly mitigated. Yeah? Just like, don't fight the guards in the castle. Like, don't care about the vendor that you're robbing. Don't care about the Healers Guild. Minus rep is a, you get the minus rep for plus clout. Isn't that how that works? Yes, I'm a minus rep guy. It's time to discuss sensors right now. Oh boy, let's go. So sensors, how good are they? They're pretty good. Why are they pretty good? Because rep just generates itself most of the time. Why wouldn't you just like free value? I want to say that the accuracy ritual sensor, whatever it's called. No, there's 2 of them. Sorry. Right? You gotta use both of them or whatever. They're extremely powerful. Just extremely fucking powerful. Sorry, I don't mean to curse, but they're very low rep and you can stack them, which is nuts. Like you get 3 of those sensors and it's super strong. Yeah, accuracy ritual is the wand thing. Right. So we have block and armor for sensors. Sorry. That's what I was trying to clarify. So it's 10% each. Oh yeah, and resist elements, also very strong. Or is it 20%? Maybe 20%. Either way, the point is these sensors are strong, stackable, and cheap, which is great. So how much gold does an inventory slot cost? For you, less than for me. I don't know. For me, it's like 25 gold a pop. You get 20 of them or whatever. I don't know. Take it easy, Blue. Thanks for hanging out, man. We'll definitely post the recording later. Your input was valuable. So you can pay 25 gold plus 50 gold for, what is it, 20% block? Yeah. Yeah. It's extremely cost effective, right? You give up those inventory slots, and then you basically you need less resources, which means you need less equipment, which means the slots kind of save themselves, right? It needs to return 3 HP to be worth it. And if we go by what you were just saying, block gets less valuable the more of it you have, correct? So if you're at 40% block, then that plus 20 is pretty nuts. If you're at 80% block, maybe it's less nuts. If you pay 200 gold to buy the sensor, it's still kind of good. Yeah, I mean, we got a 75 gold cost. We needed to heal 75 HP, essentially, right? Because that's the cost. And then 200 gold for the sensor. I mean, you get to use this multiple times, right? It's not even just once. So why are we going into negative rep again? What about the times when you don't get any good sensors? Happens. What about the times when there's no healers? It also happens. And then there's the times when block and armor are worthless. Thievery builds, you know? Somebody remind me, do any of the Healers Guild assassins drop items? Did someone just say block is worthless? So let me put it to you this way. I've had runs at 1 noise with a dagger that would never wake up any enemies. Why do I need block? What's the point? They just stabbed everything and walked out of the game. You know? At some level of noise, the other stats beyond melee are not that important. Yeah, let's not build arguments with the precedent of what we've already found over 300k gold or 3k gold. They're not relevant. Sure. I'm just saying those runs happen. But yeah, we've already found the win. Cool. And if we haven't found the win, block is obviously valuable. However, are there not times when how do I put it to you this way? We've already accrued so much block that the sensors don't matter? Now, I know what you're going to say. You should be ditching your heavy armor, and then that's never the case. But I don't think that's always an option. Already getting close to 3k territory? It's fair enough. Fair enough. So I guess what we're trying to say is that sensors are always valuable if you haven't won the game. And a lot of times they bridge that gap for you, and they're very efficient at doing so. Almost always. Possibility of finding sensors in lab has some relevance. Sure. What about this consideration? If you're using an edged weapon, you never go below 0 rep. So you could have some rep in your inventory that you use for specific situations, yeah? In which case, you know, the sensor is less valuable because you're only using it in specific situations, but you're still getting value out of it when you otherwise maybe would not. So even then, the sensors are still eking out some value. Probably more than 75 gold worth. And you say you should pickpocket with low thievery percent instead. No, I don't think I would generally, actually. I think I think it's more like if I have 75% thievery, but I also happen to get unlucky and roll negative rep, it's not that big of a deal. The cost isn't that high. To begin with, I think the variance from pickpocketing is unacceptable until you truly need the gold. Sure. No, I agree with that. It seems to be very rare that a run absolutely has to pickpocket to reach that 2.5k gold requirement. You know? It's almost like pickpocketing is fluff most of the time. Which is fine. It also sometimes, makes up for deficiencies while still being fluff. I got over 200 gold from pickpocketing in less than 10 runs. That's it, huh? And then, even when you do have high pickpocketing, sometimes it's not successful, and you just like raise their vigilance and all that. So it's not even always positive. Of course, if I spent more time playing them after already winning, I could have gotten more. Sure. We're discounting the idea that we've already won and we would continue pickpocketing for whatever reason. That's not important. But the times where we're like, okay, I need this upgrade. I could pickpocket for the gold now at 60% chance, or I could go look for a diamond in lab, right? Sometimes the pickpocket is worth the risk of having the negative rep, right? Run's usually already won once the light orb has been touched. I think plus vision is a very, very powerful stat. Very powerful, right? I mean, it's good for many different archetypes, not just thievery. And it's also one of the most easy to acquire thievery stats. You got the scroll of vision, you got the light orb, you got the light wands, you've got the lanterns, there's just so many things that give you vision. It's very strong. I just find the notion of minus rep being irrelevant questionable if it comes with a qualifier other than rarely. I think we can agree on that. It's not often that I'm thinking, okay, minus rep is going to be good or even just okay here, right? I want to say 5% of runs, I would say minus rep is acceptable, right? I mean, hell, that probably lines up exactly with how my runs have gone so far. I think I've had like 2 minus rep runs out of 20, 30 runs, something like that. In that sense, 2.5 to 2.6 did successfully nerf pickpocketing. It was very common. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, what are the best pickpockets right now? Is it just the chests in the castle that you have to teleport to? Sometimes some of the random, like the silver chests? I don't even know how much better than those are than the regular red chests in the castle. So, silvers are good, yeah. But, you only get to them what feels like 10, 15% of the time. So even if they're amazing, they're still not, on average, not that great. The reds can be silver too? True. That's true, I forgot about that. Sometimes castle is 2 times silver. That's pretty strong. And silvers always have enchanted gear, correct? Interesting. Anyway, let's dial back to the NPC question. Okay. The best ones are Chef, Fletcher, and Cell NPCs. Agreed? So Chef gives you insane items, usually for cheap. Sure. Fletcher, I already said that arrows are the best upgrades in the entire game and the most cost-effective. So, sure. And Cell NPCs. I mean, the merchant that you get in every castle is probably the best NPC that you get every run. So, yeah. Sure. Completely agree. We can claim Chef and Fletcher are good just because MP is good. Yeah, sure. I don't know exactly what MP has to do with fletching. If magic missile is good, arrows are nuts. I guess. I mean, arrows are just way better than magic missiles, so I don't know. Sure. And then the chef is the king of stat restoration. which is just obviously insane value. There's no way to claim magic builds suck, but flame arrows are insane. Flame arrows are interesting because I think they're like the worst arrows, right? I know Blue really likes flame arrows, but I like the ice arrows a lot more. Flame arrows are in fact non-lethal. Isn't that bad? That's what I'm trying to say. Oh, are you saying for rep with sensors? Okay, interesting. That's probably true. I was kind of considering the fact that ice arrows actually kill stuff to be good, but you're saying that makes them worse. I guess it depends, really, but usually you're probably right. The rep is valuable. Okay. Former stronger than the ability to sell. Chef is stronger. Sorry, Chef and Fletcher are better than the ability to sell. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, I think there's something to be said about the Enchanter here as well. But, yeah, I mean, I absolutely think that the Chefs and the Fletchers, you see them and it's just a huge boon to your run. So, how much is a Frost Arrow worth? Oh, man. A lot. Does more than 2 MP usually does. So, you know, Frost Arrow is what? 2 damage blunt? No, sorry. That's the Fire Arrow. What am I saying? It's 1 damage, right? And then 5 damage ice? Is that how it works? Why can I not remember this? I just remember really liking the ice arrows. Ironically close to 100 gold, which is kind of weird. Seriously, each arrow, I mean, you upgrade 30 arrows and it costs you like a few hundred gold, and then each arrow itself is worth. Like, you might kill an enemy in 2 or 3 arrows. That alone is probably worth like 150 gold, if not more, right? So the value translation is just absolutely insane. And you do get a ton of arrows, usually, right? Usually. Sometimes you're a little low. I've had runs that have been really tight on arrows, but usually those worked as well. To an extent, everything about bows feels strong. Missile percent, surprise attack, arrow upgrades. Sure. The arrow upgrades just become spells attached to your ranged. Missile percent is unusually easy to acquire across like a ton of different, you know, we got sensors, we got armor that helps with this, we got like bows and things that help with this, there's buffs, there's all kinds of stuff that make missile percent good. And then of course the surprise attack is just very strong against anything that can be surprised. It's one of the best reasons to take the arrows if you're doing 5 extra damage whenever you shoot something, right? Like scientists or whatever, thieves, or sorry, not thieves, priests and things like that. So, druids. It's just very strong. I've never been disappointed by a ranged build other than running out of ranged stuff. Right? That's how I feel about it anyway. So, the magnitudes here are sufficient to claim we're mainly worried about runs that don't spawn a Chef or Fletcher. Yeah, the castle chef spawning with food on the floor is ridiculous. I wonder how much gold that is. Without even using the chef, how much gold do you get from a chef room? There's always like 4 food items, and then there's like 2 water barrels, and sometimes there's food crates, right? Is a chef just plus 1,000, 1,500 gold on its own? Yeah, I mean, at 7 food on the inventory, it might even be like, you might even get 2,000 plus gold from 1 chef room. Absolutely insane. That's a great way to look at it. And then, no, Fletcher, you know, Fletchers are even cheaper, but they don't give you like spawn value like that. But, you know, they just give you the power of ranged, which is already really strong. So let's say you don't spawn either of those and you only spawn like an enchanter. Like, how sad are you? Is there a single chef upgrade that's bad? Yeah, there is one. You don't like fermented apple? What about the silver leaf upgrade to gold leaf? Oh, is that alchemist? Oh, okay. Um, you don't like -3 rep? It's interesting that you value rep so highly that like 3 rep outweighs 10% melee. That's crazy to me. Especially when there's like ways to get rep easily, right? You run into a dead room and it's like it completely outweighs itself. I don't know. I guess the cider does have a cost as well. That's true. That is true. Better to buy melee percent from warriors. Sure, it's cheap there and doesn't have the rep penalty. So I guess what you're saying is rep unusually positive. So things that would destroy your rep are inherently less valuable, even if they cost slightly less than all their alternatives, right? Like buying melee percent from warriors permanently or whatever. I think it's pretty similar cost, actually, those two. So it's actually just straight up worse. Is any NPC you invest in on par with these two, or do they stand out? I don't know. I like the weaponsmith a bit. Weaponsmith is kind of nice, but I don't think it's that good. And then the enchanter, I mean, you run into a cheap enchanter. Is that not run winning? Yeah, if it's cheap, right. Normal cost enchanters are quite hard to take full advantage of. Very expensive. So if we focus on the average, then probably enchanter's not as good. An average weaponsmith also not as good. Plenty of times you just don't even care to upgrade your weapon, or like maybe he's, expensive or whatever. Alchemist is the closest, or is it mage? I'm not a huge fan of mages usually. However, sometimes they have rods on sale, and those rods are like amazing. So that's true. They do have the best services. That's true. I also don't take as much advantage of services as I probably should. So it's something I could learn from your runs. Alchemist is quite strong though. Like Alchemist feels like Chef Light to me, don't you think? I think Wizard Potions alone are insane, right? 4 Wizard Potions is a 1 run. It's not even that expensive. And Night Leaves is the most common thing ever. Greater Healing for 40 is super good, yeah. Turning those Leaf Aloes into better HP per inventory slot. Pretty valuable. This just magma stones for perma fire res aren't like amazing, but no, actually I don't like the permanent reses that much. Now I think about it, they're not very good. Like I'd rather just eat 4 magma stones, I think. If we claim we're in a difficult run without Chef and Fletcher, with less than 1k gold in underground, implying no large amount of Nightleaf, sure. What sort of builds and NPCs do we invest in? Ranged. But we said no Fletcher. I like rogues. Right? I like rogues for the noise, yeah. And because they can still have some like other thievery stuff, like poisons and stuff that can be good. So, like you remember that one run I had where I used the same rogue like 20 times in the run, just for his poisons. It was super strong. Battle inspiration, yeah, from the warrior, very cheap and effective. It's kind of like the accuracy ritual, you know. It's actually more expensive than accuracy ritual, but. So the answer is if we don't have a ton of food, we temp stack with thievery. That is the meta. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. On average, that is definitely what you do. Last resort is metal stuff, and then when those things don't happen, you're just having a great time with your magic or your sensors, or maybe you've got a great melee weapon, whatever, all of that stuff. But wizard's pots and thievery, so be it. Yeah, I mean, wizard pots are just insanely good. I wonder how much one each each one might be 500 gold, plus 500 gold each wizard pot. I legit think that 4 wizard pots and 50% armor like wins the game. Seriously, it's like so close. I have no idea what you actually get from magic res. It's best against Maelstrom. Well, like think about it like this. It lets you avoid the ghoul's scream, yeah? So it's like slow negation. That's pretty nuts. Does it avoid mutations? I don't remember if that's the case, actually. It may not. It doesn't, right? Okay, yeah. But like all of the most dangerous enemies in lab, except for the dragon, maybe, have magic attacks. All of them. And being able to completely dodge those attacks is so powerful. So, yeah, I think I would be willing to say that each wizard potion is about 500 gold. And I guess we have to say that they get less valuable the more of them you drink. But still, really, really good. Wizard potion and thievery meta. I like it. Yes, unless there's magic fountains and stuff. Right. Wow. Okay. So once again, to recap, we've determined all of the stats are somewhere between 30 and 40 gold worth of value. We've determined that diving past the underground into the dungeon is usually very effective. Like blitzing is really good. And then determining the proper exploration route after doing so is also very important. And then we've determined that there are specific NPCs that we're looking out for in the castle. And if we don't find them, there are a few different ways that you can still salvage enough value to be able to take on the end game. And it mostly relies around thievery and some of the other slightly less powerful merchants. That seem reasonable? So we know how to time underground, and we know what builds to invest in. With rare builds happening is a small percent of runs. Or in a small percent of runs. How do we spend the various resources we have, like projectiles, and how to sequence D4, D5 into L1 through 5? That's a good question. So basically, how do we take our assembled build into the end game and not throw? For example, challenge vaults. It's a good question. I think vaults require an accurate assessment of how much power you've already accrued, because many times you'll just completely avoid the vaults if you're already powerful enough, So, the main questions are, for me, can you deal with a water elemental? Can you deal with mutants? Can you deal with some of the more difficult ranged enemies? And I think there are some expensive risks with merely opening the door for challenge vaults, for example. Sure, challenge vaults are always terrifying. Air elemental pulls you right into the vault, right? What now? Yeah. Then you gotta teleport out or something. And even then, it's not guaranteed to help you. Now, granted, these vaults can have thousands of gold in them, right? Thousands. But obviously they carry some risk of ruin, and we've already determined risk of ruin is extremely expensive. So I do think in many cases the vaults are just not worth exploring. Can we just claim here that teleberries are worth 100 gold each as such? Just having them in inventory is simply good? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, teleberries being better than phasing is obvious. And then I like that stuff for just going down twisty stairs, or sometimes teleberries save you in your early underground exploration, right? It is worth noting the average reward of these vaults is over 1k gold. Yeah, that's true. The average. I have to go, unfortunately. Thank you both. I've learned a lot. Look forward to the rest later. Take it easy, BTS. We'll definitely post it. This has been a lot of fun. Take it easy. I assume we don't have too much more to discuss. Anyway, it's been a good session, that's for sure. Wow, almost 3 hours. Damn it. But sure. So we can claim that looking for alien items before vaults can be reasonable, or can we claim that? There are certainly situations where you go down a floor in a lab that's not even a twisty stairs, and then you're in a really dangerous predicament, right? Like you see a water elemental, he knocks you off the stairs, and then you can't even get back on the stairs to leave. So it's risky, right? It's almost like, I think that's less risky than exploring the vault, though. Right, berries, healing, projectiles necessary. Absolutely, absolutely. You have to be prepared for the game throwing its worst at you when you go down the stairs, and then you can reassess. But even if you're prepared for a vault, there's a lot of times where you just get completely boned while doing it. So, it just seems for me that the return on value from the vaults is generally not worth it unless you're so strong that the contents wouldn't have really mattered anyway. That's my general understanding. A bit of a simplification, sure. I mean, I have had runs where I did need to explore the vaults because I had not accrued the value yet, obviously, right? And then in those cases, the vaults were tough, but net positive, quite positive, right? I think they could be fairly win rate positive. It also depends on the vault, yeah. I mean, a dungeon vault, once you're ready for lab, or at least pseudo ready for lab, is quite less dangerous than a lab vault, yeah. You probably get a lot less rewards, but I do think that the dungeon vaults are very much approachable in most runs, yeah. I don't know about the lab ones though. The lab vaults I think are in a different category here. We could also claim wanting to look for alien items before getting bled by the invisible idiots in D5. In D5 or seeing more ghouls. Yeah. Yeah, sure. That's true. And so you're saying just diving into lab to look for alien stuff without even full exploring dungeon. Fascinating. Exploring lab for temp stacking. Just a little bit though, right? We're talking about like L1, L2. Yeah? Because you go too far and then it gets way too dangerous. Yeah, that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. I think I actually have done that a couple of times too. Just said, all right, let me look in labs, see if I can find anything useful for me, for maybe the vaults above or just in general. And I think it's worked out. So let's discuss what happens if you rest in L3. Okay. Yeah, resting in lab is horrifyingly bad. Turns out skeleton archers are harder than elementals. Funny, I had the same experience. I don't remember what it was. I think it was a noise build where it spawned a skeleton archer or whatever, and that guy was just plinking me from the middle of a giant room because they, have infravision or whatever, and it made it very difficult to escape. I think you were there for that run. Yeah, I tend to agree. Elementals especially because you can close the door and just run away from them. It's an accurate assessment. Now, they only show up if you rest, right? So, I don't think there can be any other undead into L. Would you say that um, the idea of going into L needs to preclude the idea of resting after. Like, I don't think that made any sense. Basically, if you want to go look into L, you probably don't want to be resting afterwards, yeah? Because now all of a sudden, yeah, you're biased to not rest anymore. Right. That's what I'm trying to say. Because now you could make lab way harder for the same reason I mentioned earlier, ungenerated floors won't generate more monsters when you spawn. So it's a balancing act, clearly. Brute forcing lab via MP and food is not uncommon. I've done that a few times, sure, where you just have so much food that you could just like kill an enemy or two and then rest, then kill another enemy or two and then rest. You do that to get through lab. And even if you spawn some like horrible monsters, you can usually get through it if you have enough food. Like we're talking like, 5+ food or whatever. So sure. Yeah, obviously resting is bad near end game, but it's not something you never do, I guess is the best way I would put it. So, is there any threat or any lab threat that properly justifies off-meta builds? I don't know. Even the most like dangerous enemies. Dragon gets solved by webs. So does mutant. Well, actually, not entirely mutant. Mutant gets solved by arrows or walking around. Yeah, armor for the water elementals. Yeah. The bigger ones rust you. But even water elementals can just be sniped, yeah? Like, I think low noise invisibility is just like one of the most powerful builds in the ground gives way. So like when you do that, like even if you don't surprise the elementals, they're just like not a problem. I think block is far more effective against the bigger water elementals too. Like block is just super good. But yeah, saving projectiles for lab, you almost never want to. I mean, okay, unless they're like knives and things. Like I don't know how good knives are in lab. I don't think they're very good. I think those are more like mid-game consumables. Knives are okay. Okay. But arrows, it generally doesn't make sense to use them early unless you're like in a life or death situation. 3+3 is a kill on a water elemental, and if they rust, then that changes their application a bit. That makes sense. Interesting. Still, yeah, saving your projectiles for lab, almost always good. Projectiles solve so many of the monsters, yeah. In fact, projectiles solve all of the monsters that you can't solve with doors. Is that fair? Like, all of the humans, that's it, right? All the mutants, all the elementals get solved by doors, and so do dragons and all that other shit. So really, that's how powerful ranged is. It just deals with every part of the game that you can't deal with by moving. That's pretty powerful. This is why your bow build gets wrecked by the undead. Yeah, no, you're right. And also because you shoot through the skeleton's bones, um, but yeah, and so that says that on a ranged build, resting is particularly dangerous because now you can spawn like the one thing that counters your build in a really dangerous area. Very interesting. Very interesting. I don't think I can say that magic solves these monsters in the same way. So it does seem like magic, being its own build is still subpar in comparison to like any type of thievery build. But of course, magic is very supplementary, like I said. So we already have a bias for preserving snowballs. Yep. Stockpiling food phasing without spending it. Statues are rarely an issue. I mean, look, you're the one with the streak, but I have had all of one run where statues were an issue. And they were an issue because of a misplay on my end. So, in my opinion, statues are almost a non-threat. Yeah, not that high of a threat, right? You even have the dungeons where you don't even get any statues. It's true that like sometimes they make you rest a bunch of times, or like kill your temp stack, but generally you're okay in that regard. I think I had one run where I ran out of food, and I didn't die, but like it was really close because of statues. There's a little unique decision making here. I think keeping your plate instead of selling it is wrong. Sure. I mean, let's rephrase, right? The only time statues are dangerous is if they're in the way when you're ascending. Sometimes they're not. In fact, most of the time they're not. It's like when you get one of those rooms with 4 statues by the stairs, and it's like difficult to lure them out, right? Because you can also solve them with doors. There's the rare case where you see a bunch of them and they're unavoidable, so maybe 100% armor good. That's about it. And here's the thing. You know about this ahead of time, right? Very unlikely that that's going to be in lab. So you should know, hey, this room is going to be bad for ascending. I should keep some armor for this, right? That's like the only time that makes sense. So yeah, I don't know. And there's also the fact that like, you know, you can teleport them. You can teleport yourself, phase around them, whatever, lock them behind doors, run past them. It's not like they're fast. All of that. Yeah, they get destroyed by rods. We can rest through them. There's just so many ways to beat them. And they also speak to the power of temp stack, because again, resting is the thing that like opens and closes doors. So if you don't ever rest, then like you've already closed all the doors for all of the statues, and then you don't even run into them in the first place. So there, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a humongous amount of options for statues, to the point where they are almost never an issue. Which is pretty interesting compared to like, you know, Rogue or other games. Including just waiting for them to enter a room and dropping the artifact and closing the door. Wait, that works? I had no idea, dude. That's hilarious. What, do they just stop moving when you drop the artifact? Wow, that is so busted. Okay. But I guess you can't attack them when they're not moving, but still. You know. Looks like there's a lot of ways that could be gamed. They might refresh their HP. Not important if you weren't attacking them, right? So what that allows you to do is say, let me put this fight on pause for a second, go get other gear or whatever, and then come back. You know, not that you really want to be doing that, but it's an option. So, anyway, back to lab. How do we sequence exploration? I mean, I think it depends a little bit on a couple of things. One, if you're temp stacking or not. If you're not temp stacking, more exploration is usually less dangerous. If you are temp stacking, a lot of times you have some type of detection, or maybe you have scroll of exits, or maybe you just have some type of info war, right? Usually in your temp stack. And that allows you to avoid a lot of the major threats, or even detect all of the treasure that you want to see in lab. So the sequencing there, I think when you're temp stacking, is optimized based on your info war, either a blitz path or some deviation of a blitz path that includes some loot next to it. Door traps are really annoying, sure. Most of the time they can be avoided, but sometimes you have those rooms where there's like an elemental behind it, and like you have to touch the door, and then it explodes in your face, and you're really sad. But essentially, if I see a door trap, and I know where the exit is, I'm probably not going in that room, right? And if I don't know where the exit is, well, I'm going to try to prioritize rooms that have obviously less exclamation points And you can usually kind of tell what is behind a door based on the exclamation point. Like, you'd be like, oh, it's a turtle because it's slow, or oh, that's a fire elemental because it moved like an elemental because it moved like a bunch of tiles when you rested. So, if you think a door trap is bad for an elemental, maybe it's less bad for a turtle, and that's, it depends on your build. But essentially, you can kind of rank the risk for each of the doors that you need to look through based on what enemies are behind them. So the meta is largely that we temp stack to the crystal gate and get out without resting. Yes. Whether temp stacking or not, you avoid opening certain doors and be careful about scientists coming out to hunt you. Specifically, I can speak to a run where I was fine against scientists and a bunch of enemies, including I had a ton of HP, but the scientists ran away and then opened doors that other enemies were behind, like dragons, and then that became very dangerous. So even enemies that you're not worried about like directly attacking you can still be quite dangerous. Once we rest to underbuff slow, or we rest once to undebuff like slow before taking the artifact. Probably not resting on L5, use a portal. Yeah, I agree. Yep, 100%. I mean, if you get to the portal on L5, generally you can afford to go get the artifact, leave L5, and then like rest on L4 if you have to, right? Or like let's say you rested on L3 earlier and you have to rest like after L5. You can just rest on L4 again, not a huge deal probably, and then you just keep going up. But you should probably rest in U2. Wait, but you say hence portal. Can you explain, given the fact that the portals disable after you pick up the artifact? What am I missing here? Oh, before grabbing the artifact. Yeah, sure. That makes sense. As in, right. You portal out, you rest above, and then you portal back in. And then that gives you... It does spawn monsters on the floor, but I think it's less bad than having rested on that floor specifically. I believe is how that works. So, not to mention you could portal back in, and then you could take a look at the rooms that you need to go to before you're ready to go and just clear them out real quick or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting that to me there are three states of the game, right? There's Blitz Underground, get to your comfort zone, then you start full exploring, even throughout all of Dungeon, Underground and Dungeon. And then once you're ready for Lab, it's most often another Blitz through Lab. Avoid danger, avoid risk, until we can accrue power, until we can use that to avoid danger and avoid risk. Fascinating. So we have a comprehensive overview of how a run plays out. Let's go through it once more, focusing on low rolls, because we have not even mentioned the threat of goblin monks in specifics. Okay? So, mentioning low rolls, I guess let's start in the early game. So early game, no weapons, no decent armor. We run into... yeah, it doesn't really change via the depth, right? Let's say we're underpowered. That's probably an easier thing to say. We're underpowered and we run into goblin monks. We're terrified. We're underpowered in dungeon and we run into goblin snow goblins. We're terrified. We're underpowered in early underground and we run into goblin guards. Most of the time we're having a bad time. Need to perform goblin skip. If we're low rolling, we can still assume over 100 gold loot per underground floor, but that's low and it can be difficult to access. Yes. Usually still positive, but not worth the risk early most of the time. We already know that in weak runs we don't want to full explore you, right? And like, there's times when we're weak and we're thinking, okay, if we see a goblin monk in the next floor, or in the next exploration room, like we just die. And so there's like high risk with any type of exploration then. So we get to D1 with what sort of situation? Because we're not exploring much and we're not high rolling loot. So a lot of times you get to dungeon in these low rolls, and you might even have fists still, and like a piece of armor or two, or a candle. Yeah, we have a shield with no lethal weapon. Sure. The thing about these situations is, yeah, food is 2, can be lower as well. There's generally some type of armor or weapon room on D1 or D2. Yeah? So all of a sudden we do want to explore more of dungeon. There are some pretty bad low rolls early on, like ice rooms or snow goblins or whatever. But there's also the castle, and of course, finding any weapon means we can go explore up above again. So while there is still risk in dungeon, exploring, the profit vastly outweighs the risk. If our loot is weak, what will generate lethal risks on exploration? I mean, I don't think you can get ghouls that early on D1. So it's mostly like ice rooms. A bunch of skeletons in dungeon can be awful early on. Hungry eyes. Hungry eyes can be bad. Blue died to a zombie hand from 10 HP. You think we're doing well against a monk? Yeah, we're not doing well. But, I've also had runs with no armor beat goblin monks. It's not impossible. It's just unlikely. I would say if D doesn't reveal loot close to stairs and we don't have aloe, we dive. You might want to still go looking for bushes? Okay, interesting. Just because the healing might be helpful. Even at 2 food? So here's the thing. I mean, dungeon does seem to have a lot of food crates and stuff as well. So I could see going to look for bushes in order to get some leaf aloes and things being acceptable, because maybe we can rest 1 more food in dungeon, and then that'll give us enough power and HP to actually find the castle or explore a bit further. Now, the shield does work against monks. Attacks of opportunity can't generate martial combo, so the range you have to explore from the stairs is not trivial. Huh. Attacks of opportunity can't generate martial combo. I didn't know that. In that sense, we always start with looking through D and maybe go back for aloe. Yeah, the twisty stairs. Basically, if we can still escape the monk, I mean, I know they're fast, but we can still run away from them even through the attacks of opportunity, and then go look for a little bit more power to deal with them on the rest of underground, which makes sense to me, right? Generally, the problem with the ground gives way in exploration is you run into a threat that is faster than you, or you can't escape from, and now you also can't kill it, and you die, right? But if you decide you can escape from this great threat, then exploration is less risky, right? This is probably the most surprising part of this streak. I was not consistently reaching D1 with a strong build that can kill monks, but it never turned out to be a great problem, whereas in 2.5 that happened a lot. Because you would maybe see a monk, and then you go back up, you clear the rooms that you left behind, and then you find your rapier or whatever, right? Fascinating. Or you just see a stuck door before seeing a monk. Yeah, right. I mean, I think you see the stuck door, and you've already catapulted yourself, nearly halfway to winning, right? Just from 1 stuck door. It's crazy. Now, you don't always capitalize on that value immediately. Sometimes it's just gold, and you have to get to the castle to spend it, but still, like, an incredible value from 1 stuck door. And like you see 2 or 3, and that's usually run ending, like run winning. I mean, so pretty interesting how that works. Dungeon has a lot of low rolls, certainly. Certainly. I mean, there's a lot more dangerous enemies in Dungeon than there are in Underground, but generally not on D1. One of them is exploration blocked by traps. How do we react to that? So generally my strategy there is if I max HP and I have good energy and all that, I'm just not exploring those right away, right? I'm just going to dive a little bit further. It's one of those things that I'd like to spend like HP like to open those things and then like rest afterwards kind of deal. It depends though. If you're out of restoration or something, it's not a big deal. Or you have like thievery or whatever. Drop a rock next to a floor trap. What does that do? Aliens. Oh, aliens set off the trap? Wow. That is cheese. Or BTS is going to want to hear this. But it makes sense, actually, right? Mostly avoided abusing this. It does feel a little bit illegitimate, right? That's like a... It's not floor inventory, but it's like using... It's like if you could use recyclers to guarantee that rooms were safe for you in Cogbind. You know, it's very strange. And also, I don't really like strats that involve holding down the spacebar, you know? Forcing fleeing mobs through door traps feels fair. Sure. That's much better, right? Like, there's a door trap and you have HP and you chase a priest or whatever through the area because you have more HP than them, and then boom, you just open the traps and then you take care of them. That actually feels like intended. Interesting idea, though, dropping the rocks. Aliens probably shouldn't set off traps, huh? Fascinating. Okay, so we've talked about early game strategy with low rolls. We've talked about general strategy across the entire streak. We've gone through individual analysis of all of the stats. All right, let's talk about dungeon a little bit more. Now, if we're low rolling, we're also getting forced out of upper HPs. How does exploration at lower HP work in dungeon? It's tough. Very tough. It's riskier than underground. Yeah, the scout snipes you, right? With the surprise attack. You can't even run from him. It's terrifying. He opens the door. So there's something to be said about exploring with more than 8 HP, yeah? Yeah, they aggro before you even know. Ah, there we go. Right into how thievery changes everything, right? Or, sorry, minus noise. Dodging surprise attacks is a pretty valuable aspect of that, huh? I also like that, minus noise protects you against undead ranged attacks quite a bit. Basically any range, minus noise is strong against. I don't know if it's stronger than 100% armor, but it's up there. And the minus noise also works against magic attacks in the same way. So probably just stronger. Way stronger. Yeah, I definitely think the runs where you find Velvet Robe and Cloth Hood and you don't put them on are few and far between. Black Slime. 2 noise and 5 damage at 4 range. That's pretty strong. I don't quite remember. But that definitely sounds like a lot. And essentially what we're saying here is if you're exploring it at low HP, there are enemies that can surprise and like basically one-shot you before you can even react, right? Just by opening the door. And so you need to be prepared to mitigate that. either by resting, by having low noise, maybe you have invisibility, maybe you high block. All of these things are possible. It's clear that in 2.6 players are mostly dying to undue risk on exploration. We've said that every underground floor is likely over 100 gold at least. In dungeon, that's probably even better. Oh, easily. Easily. 150, 200? Probably 200. You just need to play it out slowly if suffering. Yeah, I mean, for me at 6 HP in dungeon, I'm resting, right? Like, it solves a lot of problems. And it also mitigates hungry eyes and stuff like that. I often like spending my food more quickly in dungeon because of that reason. I guess it does risk the time that castles like D4, D5. But that's also 20, 40% of the time, right? So, you'd have to seriously low roll for that to be that much of a threat. And yeah, it's not exactly necessary to find the castle. Sometimes you find your power without finding the castle, so that's even less of a threat. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I've done challenge vaults in U before castle. Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're probably dungeon challenge vaults, right? You're not talking about lab vaults, are you? But still, you can often, not often, but sometimes you can put that together. And that is a viable alternative. So essentially, yeah, it does seem like most of the deaths come from risky exploration. I've even had times where I've been very conservative with my exploration, and it's still paid off, right? Just like barely explore anything, get to castle, and then assemble a build, and boom, you're good. It happens a lot. So, Blue was saying something about lab vaults on D1. I'm not sure opening them is that egregious on cost. You think so? Are you never worried about, like, trolls and things? Disenchant scroll. Is that for putting on the enchanted stuff that you find? That's true. I mean, the value is high. If we can avoid the downsides, it's a lot of gold. I don't disagree. It's very unlikely to not find a huge power spike in a lab vault. So I like that too. It means they're enticing most of the time. Would you say that it's fair that you really only want to hit these lab vaults when you just haven't accrued enough power up through like D3, D4 kind of deal? Like, I've definitely had times where I've been like, all right, I'm not ready for lab, but if lab vault rolls well, then I'm really strong and we're good to go. And sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes you just get like a bunch of stuff in the vault that your build is like really good at killing, and that's not a problem. Yeah, I think that's doable. And I also had times where you roll poorly on the vaults, and then you just close the door and walk away. So there's a lot of ways to mitigate it. Even with 500 gold on risk percent, the calculation doesn't look that bad. But if you explore elsewhere first, it's easy. Yeah. The more you explore elsewhere and don't find anything, the higher value the vault becomes. Does that mean the more you low roll, the better the vaults are? Or is it not a low roll in the first place because there's a vault? Kinda, but 2,500 gold is still low enough that it's hard to argue win rate has dropped to 90%, unless you own your last food. So you'd need to be desperate. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So if you're low rolling and you're desperate and you've explored a lot, now you're looking at vaults like they're juicy because they're like your last resource basically. If you have about 3 food total, it's time to start thinking about the vault, and that's about it. That makes perfect sense to me. That makes perfect sense. Okay. And then, of course, lab doesn't have any vaults. It just has like the alien rooms. That's not true though. I guess there's a dragon vault, but like I feel like a lot of the lab prefabs are basically just for fluff. Like you never go to the dragon vault, right? Like how often does that even happen? Most of the time, you just want to avoid that shit. So that's kind of one of my like. It's kind of a bummer for me because I really like late game loot, but since this is the meta is to optimize your exploration in lab, generally you want to avoid stuff like that, it seems like. So we had a hard time finding castle. How badly can we low roll castle? Pretty bad. Pretty bad. Wait, it's not guaranteed an NPC? I didn't know that. That's crazy. It's got to be pretty rare not to get one. We think barrels are better than 100 gold on average, and I guess barrels are guaranteed. Now, we get to castle, and we don't have anything to spend our energy on. Maybe the barrels are less valuable, right? But that's also kind of rare. The chests are positive too, but maybe worse than barrels because of rep. Could
Hello.
be. Hey, Danny. We are recorded right now, so just letting you know. But we're talking about GJ's 100-run streak and the insights that we're gleaming from it. So, so the worst possible castle is still probably like 500 gold. Does that seem reasonable? And like some castles are thousands of, like some castles win the run all on their own. So in general, castles will get you the power that you need to win the game. I would say on average. So we're not making the mistake of full exploring dungeon, and we're going into L1 a bit early. We do actually have 1k value regardless, just about always. Yeah, from the castle. Yeah, for sure. We've got at least 100 gold per underground floor. That's 500 right there. Probably at least 500 from the castle, like I said. So that's like 1,000 gold. Almost guaranteed. Yeah. And then all we have to do is find another 1,500 gold on top of that, right? Which doesn't really sound that difficult when we put it that way. We're not high on food. Let's say we have 3 and there's no challenge vaults, okay? So we're low rolling. We've got like low food, and we've only found our 1,000 gold from the castle. What happens in L that's bad? Ooh. No alien spawns? Like alien rooms would be one thing. I feel like air elemental room was pretty terrifying. Yeah, or the containers have nothing. That's also possible, yeah. Is MTF live or is he just singing in there? That's what I'm doing. I'm singing. Let's see. The air elemental room is pretty terrifying. Even though they can teleport you, sometimes you just have to get through them, and they're really fast, so they just annihilate you and blind you. Don't love that. Water elementals are pretty scary as well. Fire elemental rooms are generally not so bad, I think. I think there's a point to be made about turtles and crabs, despite the fact that you can close doors on them. Yeah, sure. If a crab shreds your armor, that sucks. If a turtle poisons you a lot and you don't have bones, that can be bad. I think these situations are less impactful generally. If you had excess projectiles, you could kill crabs to sell their claw, but we can't afford that, right? We can't afford to spend 8 projectiles on a crab or whatever. Might have to take some damage running past. Yeah, I mean, the crab hits pretty hard. The turtle is less bad, especially if we have some kind of poison nullification. But, you know, they're like equally likely, so. They're also slow as fuck, right? So in weaker runs, I do think that they're a little bit more dangerous than they would normally be. Plus Invis probably gets better. I think that's probably true, you know? Because not only are you stopping crabs and things, you're also stopping coils and turrets and cannons and all the stuff that's like shooting range to you. Doesn't work with Invis. It's quite strong. I mean, Invis on the temp stack alone is probably worth like 300 gold. You know? Oh yeah, and it saves you ammunition if you need to keep that. Absolutely. So really the biggest downside of Invis is no talking to NPCs, but if you're temp stacking or running into lab, you probably shouldn't have to worry about that anymore. Fascinating. Regarding ammunition, drop rocks next to possible snowball traps, or rather put them on thief clothes and disarm them, because the aliens can spend the trap too. Oh, fascinating. Wow.
What's going on here?
Hey Hal, hey Shorm. We're recording, guys, so just keep that in mind. But we are discussing GJ's 100-run streak at the moment, and we've been going for almost 4 hours now. It's kind of crazy, but we're just talking about the end of the run. We're talking about like what happens if we were to low roll throughout the entire game. Do we still have like really high risks of ruin, or do we have like a high potential to win the game? So the current understanding, just to give you guys a quick recap, is you need about 2,500 gold to get, say, 95% win rate. And we're deciding that about halfway through the game, when you reach the castle, you pretty much are guaranteed around 1,000 gold. So now we're talking about like what happens if that's really all you get. You only get that 1,000 gold. Can you still make it through the rest of the game? And so far, the answer is looking like yes.
Question is, can you get to castle with 0 gold?
Well, so what we were describing is the underground generally has over 100 gold per floor, like on average. So while we don't want to explore underground fully immediately, there's a good chance that we might come back later to do so, to acquire said gold, to then get to the castle and do whatever
That
we
makes
need to
sense.
do. So the 1,000 gold should pretty much always be available. It's the rest that we're not sure of. The density of threats in lab still seems low enough that projectiles should be sufficient if you don't waste them. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even runs I've had like 20 snowballs total. That's usually got me through lab, which is pretty great. It's a fun question. In terms of lose con, do you expect to die pre-castle or get ground out by lab? 20% for D5 castle is still a high percent. I do think you get sort of ground badly by L. It really depends, right? I mean, your low noise build may not lose any resources at all, whereas there's other builds where you're resting a lot and you are churning through your resources pretty quickly. Oh, in a difficult run, yes. In a difficult run, sorry, you absolutely do get ground out, right? You only have so much food. You're probably not able to temp stack, or your temp stack is cut short because you had to rest. There are probably choke holds or choke points for your difficult run that you need to spend significant resources to overcome. Take it easy, Danny. So, with all that in mind, I don't think you expect to die pre-castle if you're exploring optimally. Most of the time, right? You see a threat that you can't deal with, you can always go back and try to accrue more power. The only time this isn't true is twisty stairs. So I think generally that's not where you're trying to die. I think that GJ says, I think that if you avoid insane exploration, which apparently costs hundreds on small risks, then it is in fact the case you die more often in L than pre-castle. And that was surprising to me. Oh, fascinating. Okay, so I guess I'm off. Let's see. Anyone who played a lot of 2.5 knows how hard it was to get to castle, but I think the players then were misplaying 2. Well, in this version, we did lose a lot of like monster spawns, so it certainly has gotten easier alongside some of the other changes that BTS has made. But what you're saying to me is that you're surprised by the fact that castle now seems to not be the difficult part of the run, right? It's almost like the times that you're having a hard time in this game are when you haven't acquired your 2,500 gold by the time you reach lab, and then you're trying to eke out extra value in lab. And if you can't get it, that's when you die. Simply because you're guaranteed that 1,000 gold early, essentially. Fact of the matter is, if your starting food is high and average loot is high, you mainly need to avoid misplaying into combat RNG death. Yeah. You explored a little bit too greedily, you aggroed a couple too many goblins, and then that cost you the run. Because you didn't even need to do that. You could have just gone to the castle and gotten power there, where it's safe. I think that makes a lot of sense. And that greediness somewhat disappears in lab because you're also forced to explore and look for doors, right? Like sometimes you have to go through these dangerous rooms and there's nothing you can do. Given this, I think we can claim with at least 50% confidence that 1% in 2.6 is above 98%. Wow. 98%. It seems like it, yeah. It seems like it. I could definitely see that. I mean, not just from my own experiences, but from viewing your run, viewing some other people's run. Whenever I see other players like following the strategy of minimizing risks until they get to castle, they seem to get much farther than they normally do. So even just beyond the like, we know what we're doing mindset, it seems to be effective for even newer players as well. If my win rate is 99%, by the way, there is a certain realism to 200, but still not expected. That's awesome, dude. 200 would be a hell of a milestone. I guess that would be a good time to ask you, what are your plans now that you've reached 100? Are we going to do another 100? Are we going to go until we lose? Are we setting some records? I guess I'm not stopping. Hell yeah. That sounds great. Let's just see how far we can push the boundaries, right? Why not? I think if we do get to 200 here, if you get to 200, sorry. I think that's a really good argument for needing to make some changes to the game, yeah? 98% win rate is a little not fun enough. BTS is clearly taking feedback here. Yes, yeah, I mean, he was in the stream earlier, for those that didn't know, asking questions and analyzing with us. So I think that's also very cool. This streak will not stand as anything super impressive because of earlier version. I think it'll be super impressive regardless. How do we put it? The streak was so good that it caused the developer to make game-sweeping changes. The math is the coolest part of the streak. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the fact that you're able to calculate out these what seems like arbitrary values and turn them into actual like averages and win rates and all that, it's fascinating, right? It's fascinating. I've learned a lot from the Slay the Spire math, from this stuff, I'm not very good at statistics in general, so it's been really enlightening to me. I think it's improved my win rate in all kinds of roguelikes when I started thinking in terms of gold analysis. So I think others are going to have a similar feeling when they listen to this, if they listen to this. So that'll be fun. You say arbitrary value, I hear useful approximation. Yes, absolutely. If you can assign value to something like that in your head, then you can use that to make all kinds of revelations. And some of them will be wrong, but a lot of times you can glean some important insights. The approximation just needs to be better than the human brain. Right, that's the hard part, right, is the assessment. The values might be arbitrary, but if your assessment is accurate, then you can still come up with pretty reasonable approximations. So in that way, or in that regard, it's a really effective tool for getting better at these types of games. STS taught me to believe in the gold somewhat blindly. I'm wondering if there are going to be examples of games where gold analysis isn't quite as effective. Maybe games that, don't have any type of currency to tie to them. But yes, I do know what you mean. Serpent into Guardian Specialist. Right. Take a upfront, serious downside because the gold, it actually turns out to be positive in the long run. It might be 30 gold, which isn't very much, but 30 gold positive is still positive. So, think that was about what I wanted to analyze. Any questions? After 4 hours, I think I've run out of questions at this point. But I want to thank you, dude. This has been fucking awesome. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think this has been seriously enlightening as far as roguelikes go, not even just the ground gives way. You thought it was 1.5 hours? No, I'm looking at the recording. It is 3.5 hours exactly. So BTS is going to have a lot of footage to analyze. But I guess I will wrap up the recording here. So thanks for listening. Anybody who's listening, hope you learned something from it. Congrats again to GJ for just like one of the most crazy runs in any game I've ever seen, let alone a roguelike. And good luck with balancing the game, BTS. Looking forward to what you do next. All right. Thanks, guys.